Chapter 231. Kiki, does it still hurt? Poplar Fruit held Kiki in his arms. His daughter used to smell like milk, but now she smelled like Chinese medicine, which made Poplar Fruit feel sorry for her. He touched his daughter's temperature with his hand. Fortunately, it was normal. Kiki didn't answer. She grabbed her father's clothes with her small hand and shook her head gently. Poplar Fruit was happy. It seemed that she was getting better. He was in a hurry to go out and didn't bring a small quilt. He was afraid that the wind would blow his daughter, so he took off his coat and held his daughter in the middle to warm her with his body temperature. Kiki, are you hungry? Poplar Fruit asked softly. Yes. Kiki looked up at her father with a little desire in her eyes and said, Kiki wants to drink milk. Poplar Fruit stroked her little head with his big hand and said, Not yet. You'll have a stomachache if you drink milk. When we go back to the hotel, I'll cook some porridge for you, okay? Kiki didn't say anything and just nodded. Poplar Fruit picked up his daughter and let Dr. Tang check her again. Dr. Tang took Kiki's pulse carefully and nodded with a smile. Don't worry. She's fine now. She's just a little weak. She'll be fine after taking some medicine and food. Just as he was about to go back, Zheng Yujie and her assistant, who had disappeared earlier, walked in from the main door, each carrying a plastic soup container. She smiled and said to Dr. Tang, Uncle Tang, let me borrow your backyard to feed the child. Dr. Tang raised his eyelids and waved his hand to let them go. I bought porridge for you and Kiki, Zheng Yujie whispered to Poplar Fruit. Thank you. Poplar Fruit said, I don't mind. I'm not hungry even if I miss one meal. Is Kiki's porridge done yet? Zheng Yujie smiled and said, Don't worry. The reason why I went out for so long was to wait for the kanji shop's waiter to cook the porridge. I also followed the doctor's instructions and added some shredded meat and vegetables. Poplar Fruit held Kiki and watched Zheng Yujie open the box of porridge for Kiki. The rice grains are soft. Zheng Yujie checked. Do you think the shredded meat is up to standard? Poplar Fruit thought for a moment and was still a little worried. He said, her stomach has just recovered. I'm afraid that she still can't digest the shredded meat. Anyway, the nutrients have already been cooked into the porridge. Just pick out the shredded meat and vegetables. Zheng Yujie nodded, picked up a pair of chopsticks, squatted by the side, and carefully picked. The glasses girl's assistant wanted to help, but was sent out by Zheng Yujie. Go eat with IFA. You've been running around with us all morning. Go quickly. Perhaps because she was starving, Kiki didn't need to be persuaded and obediently ate the porridge her father fed her. In fact, the porridge was quite fragrant. Poplar Fruit's hungry stomach roared when he smelled it. Huh? Zheng Yujie laughed without caring about her image. She sat on the stone chair next to her and leaned forward and back. Do you want me to feed you? Poplar Fruit ignored her and only replied, Don't. If you come over again, you'll be more of a hindrance. Kiki was full. She asked her father to wipe his mouth clean and drink some warm water to rinse his mouth. Then, she quietly lay in her father's arms and closed her eyes to rest. After a whole morning of running around, the little girl was mentally exhausted. Poplar Fruit was starving. He picked up the big box of porridge Zheng Yujie bought and was about to eat when he suddenly stopped. He looked at Zheng Yujie and asked, You haven't eaten either, right? It's okay. I'll eat when I get back to the hotel. Zheng Yujie waved her hand and said. Poplar Fruit directly took half of the big box of porridge and put it into Kiki's small box. Then, he pushed the rest in front of Zheng Yujie and put in the clean spoon that hadn't been eaten yet. He said seriously, What are you waiting for? Hurry up and eat some. After that, he picked up Kiki's small box of porridge and wolfed it down. Zheng Yujie, on the other hand, curled her lips and said, Why are you so fierce? But she still sat down obediently. She picked up the small spoon with one hand and gracefully drank the porridge inside. I'm sorry. Poplar Fruit, because he was holding his daughter, could only put down the bowl and chopsticks and let Zheng Yujie, the official N generation, help him clean up. He suddenly said, What are you sorry for? Zheng Yujie stopped. Her red phoenix eyes opened wide and looked at Poplar Fruit strangely. I have a lot of things to do. I made you accompany me. I was going to play, but it's all ruined. Poplar Fruit said in a low voice with an apologetic face. At this time, Kiki was so tired that she fell asleep. He didn't dare to speak too loudly. What's wrong with that? Zheng Yujie said with a smile. I'm also playing with you. If you don't go, I'm too lazy to go to so many places. Moreover, it's not like I haven't been to these places before. Later, when you come to Guangdong Province, I'll take you to the fun places in Guangdong Province. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, when you come, you stay at my house, or you're in a hurry. I haven't done my duty as a landlord. All right. Zheng Yujie looked at him with a fiery gaze. She smiled and said, as long as I'm with you, it's the same wherever I go. Poplar Fruit felt that Zheng Yujie's words had a strange meaning, which sounded a little strange and ambiguous. But at this time, he couldn't help but think about it. His daughter's illness was still flickering in his eyes. If his daughter didn't recover, he wouldn't be able to focus on other things. When he returned to the hotel, it was already afternoon, because tomorrow afternoon he was going to lobby Yang. Martel, Poplar Fruit, and Zheng Yujie were in the living room of Poplar Fruit's room with a computer. Kiki was sleeping in the room, and Poplar Fruit's ears were pricked up so he could hear any movement. Can your plan work? Zheng Yujie held Poplar Fruit's list of key points and arguments on the computer and asked doubtfully, he's a foreigner. Can he understand your translation? He can't understand it, but isn't he on a lecture tour? Poplar Fruit laughed. It's easy to find someone who understands Chinese to help him read it. I believe that this plan will succeed. You think we can't convince him? Zheng Yujie asked doubtfully. No, that's not what I mean. Our persuasion will have a great effect. Poplar Fruit said, but he didn't have a good cooperation with the domestic publishing house before. Even if we have a glib tongue, he will still have some misgivings. Then we'll take out some solid stuff to show him, and use facts to prove our strength. This will be our finishing touch. Okay, then we'll follow your plan. Zheng Yujie's finger gently tapped on the laptop, and she sat up straight and said, it's still early to eat. Why don't you treat me as Yang? Martel, see if you can convince me? No problem. Poplar Fruit smiled, stood up, and adjusted the tie on his collar with both hands, and his whole body was bursting with strong confidence. Chapter 232. After dinner at the hotel, Poplar Fruit took out a bag of herbs and asked IFA to find someone to boil it into a decoction. IFA was an overseas employee of Dongxin Publishing. He came to Big Apple to study when he was in high school. He was also a smooth and slick person. In less than an hour, he brought back the decoction in a thermos flask. The decoction was black and smelled a little sour. Poplar Fruit had not touched Chinese medicine for many years. When he smelled it, the tragic memories of his childhood were still vivid in his mind. Poplar Fruit knew that this would be a tug of war. So, he asked IFA to boil more than a bowl of water and was prepared for Kiki to spit out half of it. At night, Kiki's spirit had recovered a lot. She was very obedient when it came to eating. Poplar Fruit could not bear to let Kiki drink such disgusting Chinese medicine. However, just as Dr. Tang said, good medicine was bitter, so she had to drink this Chinese medicine. Kiki had suffered so much in the morning. She needed to recuperate her stomach. Before feeding Kiki, Poplar Fruit tasted a small mouthful of the decoction. It was so bitter that he frowned. This won't do. Kiki would definitely not be able to drink it. Poplar Fruit asked the hotel waiter for 2 small bags of white sugar and poured it in. The taste was very strange, but it diluted the bitterness slightly. After waiting for a while, the decoction had become much colder. If he did not let Kiki drink it now, it would be even more disgusting when it became cold later. Poplar Fruit carried his daughter over and placed a clean towel under Kiki's chin. Then, he used a small spoon to scoop up half a spoonful of the decoction, coaxing Kiki to open her mouth. Kiki did not know that Chinese medicine was disgusting. She thought it was just plain water, so she opened her mouth and let her father feed her the medicine. When the medicine touched Kiki's tongue, it was as if she had just swallowed a fly. Her brows instantly knitted together, and she opened her mouth to spit out the dark, yellow medicine from the corner of her mouth. Cough! Chi-Chi spat out the rest of the medicine. Then, her tears flowed down her face and mixed with the medicine she spat out, causing her face to be covered in traces of water. Poplar Fruit had already expected this scene. He quickly pulled up a towel and wiped the medicine off Kiki's chin. Just as he was about to feed her again, Kiki refused to open her mouth no matter what he said. She twisted her face and spilled the 2 spoonfuls of soup that Poplar Fruit had prepared. It was useless to coax her. Kiki refused to let go. Tears flowed down her face, but she refused to cry out loud. She was afraid that if she opened her mouth even a little, it would give her father an opportunity to stuff the bitter medicine into her mouth. Poplar Fruit held the spoon and shook it in front of Kiki. He said, "Kiki, listen to your father. Drink some Chinese medicine, and you will be completely better. It's not bitter. Dad put sugar in it. Look, Dad can drink it." Poplar Fruit scooped up a spoonful of the medicine and put it into his mouth. He drank it for Kiki to see. "I'm really not afraid. Close your eyes, and you will drink it immediately. If you don't drink it, your stomach will still hurt. Do you want to have diarrhea and pain in your butt like this morning?" Poplar Fruit scooped up another spoonful of medicine and put it in front of Kiki's mouth. However, no matter what Poplar Fruit said, Kiki closed her mouth tightly and shook her head like a rattledrum. Looking at Kiki's unwilling to cooperate, Poplar Fruit was really at his wit's end. The medicine was getting cold little by little. He anxiously scratched his head. At this time, if Fong Beibei was here, she would definitely think of a way, right? "How is it?" Zheng Yujie pushed open the door and walked in. "Did Kiki drink the medicine?" "No." Poplar Fruit sighed and shook his head. "Chinese medicine is very unpleasant to drink. Did you add sugar?" Zheng Yujie asked. "I did, but it didn't help. She drank it and spit it out again. Now she won't open her mouth." Poplar Fruit said, "But she has to drink it." "No!" Kiki suddenly shouted at this time. She covered her mouth with her small hands and cried. Zheng Yujie also had no other way. She was used to being strong, but that was only for adults. For a Kiki, who couldn't even speak a complete sentence, how could she do anything? In the past, it was the wet nurse who lied to us. After drinking Chinese medicine, there would be candy to eat. Zheng Yujie recalled, but it seems that it didn't have any effect on Kiki. That's right, Chi-Chi had never eaten candy before. There was nothing particularly attractive to her that could tempt her to open her mouth. Coercion and bribery. If the soft approach didn't work, could it be that the hard approach was the only way? Touching the bowl that was still a little warm, Poplar Fruit gritted his teeth and said, "I'll hold her down. You come over and help me feed her." Zheng Yujie was shocked and said, "Will this work?" Poplar Fruit shook his head and said, "No, this is the only way. There is no better way." He began to take Kiki's small hands off her mouth and clamped them with one arm. Wow! Kiki seemed to feel that something was wrong. She struggled desperately, and a lot of strength burst out from her small body. However, it was Poplar Fruit who was controlling her. Poplar Fruit firmly held his daughter down and refused to let go. Because it was clamped, Kiki's arm wouldn't be dislocated because of twisting, which made Poplar Fruit a little relieved. "Quick!" Poplar Fruit shouted at Zheng Yujie. Zheng Yujie hesitantly walked over, picked up the bowl, and sat next to him. She scooped up the medicine with a spoon and then looked at Poplar Fruit. "Wait a minute." Poplar Fruit thought for a moment. It seemed that something was wrong because Kiki was crying. What if she directly poured it in and choked on the trachea? He tried hard to recall the parenting books he had read before and then read it to Zheng Yujie. Hold the child diagonally. Use one hand to pinch the child's cheeks to open her mouth. Then put the spoon in her mouth. Slightly press her tongue and lower gums, and slowly pour in the medicine. When the medicine is completely swallowed, let go of the hand pinching her cheeks and take out the spoon. Feed her the medicine intermittently in this way until the medicine is finished. Poplar Fruit finished reading and then said, "Let's change positions." He held Kiki diagonally. At this time, Kiki was struggling so hard that her mouth was closed. Her tears covered her eyes and eyelashes. Poplar Fruit gently pinched Kiki's cheeks to open her mouth. "Put the spoon in and remember to press down on your tongue," Poplar Fruit said. Zheng Yujie was a little nervous. She put the spoon in and pressed down on her tongue to pour in the medicine. Before Kiki swallowed it, she pulled the spoon out. Kiki whimpered and spat out the medicine with her tongue. "It's okay. Let's do it again." Poplar Fruit let go of Kiki's mouth and comforted Zheng Yujie. Then he wiped the spit out of her mouth. Zheng Yujie gathered her courage and did it again. This time, Kiki was forced to swallow the medicine, but her face was full of bitterness. It was funny and pitiful. "That's great. Hurry up and do it again." Poplar Fruit struck while the iron was hot. He let Zheng Yujie do it a few times and finish feeding the remaining half of the medicine. He forced Kiki to finish the medicine, but Kiki still cried for a long time. She even looked at her father with a faint resentment in her eyes for a long time. This father was too bad. Woo-woo. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 233. How is it? Is the equipment working as usual? Poplar Fruit asked in a low voice. No problem. The video is playing very clearly. Zheng Yujie's assistant, the bespectacled girl, made an okay hand gesture. What about her? Did you notice anything unusual? Poplar Fruit asked. No, she's quietly playing with her toys in the crib. She only watches TV occasionally, the bespectacled girl said seriously. Zheng Yujie took Poplar Fruit's phone and said to the front camera, Then I'll leave Kiki to you. Take good care of her. Don't let anything happen to her. Yes, boss, the bespectacled girl said seriously. After turning off FaceTime, Poplar Fruit breathed a sigh of relief. Sitting in the rented car, he felt a little relieved. They were going to meet Yang today. Martel and Kiki definitely couldn't follow them, and Poplar Fruit was a little worried about Kiki, who had just recovered from a serious illness. He made several video calls along the way. This time, the bespectacled girl stayed in the hotel to take care of Kiki, but Poplar Fruit knew that with Kiki's personality, she would definitely cry if she couldn't see him. So, early in the country, he recorded a 3-hour video and played it on the hotel's big screen TV. This would give Kiki the illusion that her father was still by her side. He didn't know if this method was effective because the last time he used it was half a year ago. Now that Kiki had grown up a lot and was smarter, it was still unknown if it could fool her. However, according to the bespectacled girl's report, Kiki was still very receptive to this method. She was able to play with her toys quietly, which meant that she was in a good mood. Even the bitter Chinese medicine forced on her in the morning didn't leave a shadow in her heart. Yang? Martel was giving a speech at a high school in Queens in the morning. In the afternoon, he promised to take 2 hours to meet them. Foreigners always valued punctuality as important as their lives, so Poplar Fruit couldn't be late. Poplar Fruit and the others had already arrived at the school half an hour earlier. The meeting location was a small office borrowed by the school. After getting permission, Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie walked in. Poplar Fruit walked behind them, holding a briefcase in his hand. He even helped close the door, just like a secretary. In fact, this was a habit left by Poplar Fruit when he used to work in a foreign trade company. Yang? Martel was a typical Western bookworm. His body and cheeks were very thin, and his eyes were very narrow, giving people a feeling that they were sunken in. He was wearing a long-sleeved light blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Yang would notice this detail and secretly let out a sigh of relief. I guessed right, this is Yang Martel. Martel is a man who does more than he talks. Nice to meet you. Martel did not pretend to be polite. He stood up from behind the table and shook hands with Poplar Fruit and the rest. Yang? Martel was a French Ghanaian, but because his father was a diplomat, he had lived abroad when he was young, so his English accent was very strange. Poplar Fruit felt that it was not the Ghanaian accent he had heard before. The main negotiator was not Poplar Fruit, but Zheng Yujie. Zheng Yujie was not fighting for the limelight, but she wanted to follow Yang. Martel was going to introduce Dongxin Publishing's capabilities to Yang. Martel listed out the benefits and reasons for choosing them. Zheng Yujie's spoken English was not bad. After all, she had studied in the U.S. for 4 years. Her vocabulary might be slightly flawed, but she could speak fluently. Her pronunciation was comfortable, and she did not have a strange Chinglish accent. When Zheng Yujie was speaking, Poplar Fruit was observing Yang from the side. From Martel's expression, he realized that it was just as he had expected. Zheng Yujie's words didn't have much of an effect on him. Sure enough, after listening to Zheng Yujie patiently, Yang, Martel shook his head and said, Dongxin Publishing does have a high status and market share in China. But as far as I know, the Chinese Yilin publishing house that I had chosen previously is also good at publishing foreign language books. They could not make my book sell well, and I have no reason to believe that you can do better. Zheng Yujie felt that she could still work harder. She analyzed the differences between Dongxin Publishing and Yilin Publishing House from different angles. But Yang? Martel waved his hand and said, "You don't have to say these. I can understand from the information you gave me in the past. But this is not enough for me to give my books to you. If there is no better reason, I think our meeting today will end here." Zheng Yujie turned her head and looked at Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit knew that it was time for him to go on stage. "Young, Mr. Martel, instead of letting your books remain unknown in China, why don't you try another publishing house?" Poplar Fruit stood up and said to Yang, who was about to leave. Martel said loudly, "Yang?" Martel hesitated for a moment and stopped. He looked at Poplar Fruit doubtfully and said, "Excuse me, may I ask who you are? Sorry, if I remember correctly, Miss Zheng did not introduce you just now." "Poplar Fruit, you can also call me by my English name, Leon. If you give your books to our publishing house, then I will be the translator of this book," Poplar Fruit confidently said to Yang. Martel said, "Mr. Leon, you look a little young." When Martel said this, his expression wasn't one of disdain. Instead, it was one of interest. Youth is not a factor to deny a person's ability, isn't it? Poplar Fruit said with a smile, "Just like in your book, a young PI can fight with a tiger in the Pacific Ocean at a young age. I think, in your heart, you also agree with this point of view." "Oh, you are right, Yang," Martel said with a smile. "Then I can give you a chance to persuade me. With a chance to speak, there is hope for success." Poplar Fruit stepped forward and put his briefcase on Yang. Martel sat on the table in front of him and said with a smile, "Actually, I have not fully introduced myself. I am a literary translator. Of course, I just started. As for why I have the confidence to sit in front of you," Poplar Fruit paused and said, "That is because at the end of last year, I was the main translator and translated the book, The Biography of Steve Jobs. This book also happened to be the bestseller last year. Its sales performance, in just 2 months, has already surpassed other imported foreign books." Poplar Fruit said it very straightforwardly. If it was in China, there might be people who slammed the table and said that Poplar Fruit was too arrogant. But this was the communication habit of Westerners. They did not like others to beat around the bush and beat around the bush, especially for Yang, who paid more attention to practical results. For Martel, this way of talking made him feel more comfortable. Chapter 234. Mr. Leon, I congratulate you on translating such a best-selling book. However, in my opinion, the book The Biography of Steve Jobs is selling so well because of Mr. Steve Jobs, right? Martel shook his head. He felt that his words were a bit too harsh. So he said apologetically, "Please forgive me for saying this, because I also admire Mr. Steve Jobs. Apple's products are popular all over the world, so I don't think Mr. Steve Jobs' biography will be bad." Poplar Fruit shrugged and said, "I know what you mean, but I want to tell you that before the new book was released, the readers knew that it was me who translated it, so our pre-sales were greatly affected." Poplar Fruit took out a piece of paper from his briefcase and pushed it to Martel. In front of Martel, he said, "However, after they read my translation of the book, they became very willing to recommend it to their friends. Therefore, after the release, our sales increased again. This is our sales report. You can refer to it." Yang? Martel picked up the sales report of The Biography of Steve Jobs and looked at it. He said, "Well, although there is no way to prove what you said, we assume that your translation of The Biography of Steve Jobs has indeed been recognized by the readers. But you should know that my book is not the same type of literary work as The Biography of Steve Jobs." He was right. The Biography of Steve Jobs could be said to be documentary literature, which was different from his novel, The Fantasy of a Young PI. So he said, "I don't think that your success in The Biography of Steve Jobs can be transferred to my book." Looking at Yang, Martel was a bit stubborn. Zheng Yujie was a bit worried for Poplar Fruit. But Poplar Fruit was not afraid. He smiled and said, "This is what I want to tell you. Not only can I achieve success in documentary literature, but I can also translate novels that the readers like." Yang? Martel was interested and asked, "Oh, is that so? Why do you say that?" "Because of my understanding of your work," Poplar Fruit said confidently. Poplar Fruit began to talk to Yang. Martel discussed various details of his work. In the beginning, Martel was listening attentively, but towards the end, he began to immerse himself in the conversation. He even argued with Yang Guo with a red face. Towards the end, his face was full of excitement, as if he had met a soulmate. Ha ha! Martel laughed heartily and said, I've held so many speeches and book signings, but I've never met a reader who understands me as well as you do. You're right. You do have a deep understanding of my works. I want to thank you for this. I want to shake hands with you again. Yang Guo smiled and took out her right hand to hold Yang Ming. Martel stretched out his right hand. When Zheng Yujie saw this scene, she heaved a sigh of relief. Martel finally relented. But he didn't. Perhaps he was afraid of being cheated by Yilin Publishing House. He was particularly stubborn and cautious today. Martel shook his head and said, I know why you are so keen on my book. I guess you must have received some news that my book is being filmed by the Chinese director Lian. Just like the biography of Steve Jobs, you want to take advantage of the release of the movie to promote my book again. Am I right? Martel said. He stopped Poplar Fruit, who was about to speak, and said with a smile, Mr. Leon, I know you have put in a lot of effort to persuade me. You speak English very well, better than me, and you do have a deep understanding of my book. But I don't know if it will be as attractive as the English version after you translate it into Chinese, because the cultural characteristics of Chinese and English are different. That's what Yilin Publishing House explained to me. So if I give the book to you, I have to take a risk. But if I give the book to Yilin Publishing House, with the fame of the great director Lian in your country, I think my book will sell well again. Martel said without hiding anything. Zheng Yujie's face turned white and red. She didn't know what to do. Yang? Mr. Martel, do you want people to buy your book just because of a movie? Do you want people to read the bad words in your book and praise Lian loudly and abuse you? Do you want your book to be popular this time and continue to be unknown in the future? Yang Guo didn't care about Yang Guo. Martel flinched at his words, his smile faded, and he asked him seriously. Yang? Martel was stunned. He wanted to say something, but hesitated. He silently looked at Yang Guo. I know you are worried about the risk, but I want to tell you that there is no other translator more suitable than me to translate your book. And my translation can really give your book a new life in the Chinese mainland. Poplar Fruit took out a small stack of about 20 pages of A4 paper from his briefcase. What is this? Martel asked doubtfully. This is part of my translation. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, I translated the first part of your novel. Then you can take it to someone who understands Chinese to help evaluate it and see if it is worth his money. Yang? Mr. Martel, you can find a professional survey company to help you do this survey. Zheng Yujie suddenly interjected. For example, you can ask them to randomly find 100 Chinese students to read this translation and see their attitude towards it. That way, you'll know whether it's worth handing your book over to Leon to translate, and whether it's worth handing it over to our publishing house to operate for you. In the end, Zheng Yujie dropped a bomb. Before you make a conclusion, please ask the survey company to pay for the cost. If you are still not satisfied, then you don't have to pay a cent. Poplar Fruit looked at her in surprise. Yang? Martel fell into silence. His fingers gently tapped on the translation that Poplar Fruit put in front of him. Every tap seemed to knock on the hearts of Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie. They looked nervously at the thin, middle-aged man. They had already played all their cards. They could only resign themselves to fate. Only Yang? Martel suddenly smiled. His big hand gently patted on Poplar Fruit's translation. Then he held it in his left hand and stood up. He reached out his right hand to Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie, saying, with such conditions, do I have any reason to refuse? Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 235. Walking out. Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie looked at each other and smiled. Poplar Fruit looked into Zheng Yujie's eyes and said, thank you. Zheng Yujie held a small bag in both hands and hung it in front of her body. She walked slowly with Poplar Fruit on the school road with the spring breeze blowing and flowers blooming on both sides. She smiled and said, thank me for what? Thank you for trusting me so much. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, aren't you afraid that my translation won't pass the investigation and won't pass the test? Martel's discerning eye? If you think it's fair to investigate, will your translation be liked by everyone? Zheng Yujie didn't answer directly, but asked Poplar Fruit. That's for sure. Poplar Fruit said confidently. In other fields, Poplar Fruit may be afraid, but in his professional field of translation, Poplar Fruit had 100% confidence. You believe in your ability, and I also believe in my vision. The man I approve of will not fail. Zheng Yujie turned her head and looked at Poplar Fruit with a burning gaze. Huh? Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said embarrassedly, Yujie, do you know that your sentence is very ambiguous? Zheng Yujie smiled and didn't answer. She turned her head and walked straight to the rented car. Poplar Fruit smiled, shook his head, and followed. How is it? A F.A., who acted as the driver, stood holding the open door and asked anxiously. I don't know yet. Zheng Yujie dropped a sentence and got into the back seat. What? You don't know yet? A.F.A. looked at Zheng Yujie inexplicably, then looked at Poplar Fruit and asked, Brother Yang, what's going on? We don't even know if it will work yet. Poplar Fruit patted him on the shoulder and smiled. Let's talk in the car. After the car drove off, Poplar Fruit sorted out the cause and effect of the matter with A.F.A. I see. So, are we still waiting in the Big Apple? A.F.A. asked. You can have a holiday when you go back this afternoon. Zheng Yujie took out her tablet and entered some memos on it. She said without looking up, you can go back to China or play in the United States for a few days before going back. Poplar Fruit and I will stay and wait for the news. And he was not waiting in the Big Apple. Yang? Martel told them that his speech and signing in New York had ended, and the next stop was various major cities in California. Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie decided to follow him and stroll around California. After Poplar Fruit got in the car, he got out of his work mode. The scene of his daughter in the hotel immediately appeared in his mind. He couldn't wait to take out his mobile phone and call the glasses girl. After he got to know that his daughter was fine, Poplar Fruit's hanging heart slowly settled down. In the evening, Poplar Fruit was lying in bed watching TV with his daughter, whose mood had finally stabilized after taking Chinese medicine. Zheng Yujie pushed the door in and saw SpongeBob SquarePants and Poplar Fruit's expression on the TV. She laughed. You're here? Poplar Fruit looked at Zheng Yujie, who was still wearing a bathrobe, and laughed. Why are you running around dressed like this? Zheng Yujie looked at Poplar Fruit and said, What are you afraid of? Is there anyone in the hotel corridor at night? I'm right across from you, and I saved you in a flash. In fact, Poplar Fruit wanted to say, Aren't you afraid of me? I'm a young man who can turn into a wolf at any time. However, when he thought of Zheng Yujie's tough character, Poplar Fruit swallowed his frivolous words. If he said it out loud, she might tease him instead. Tell me, why are you looking for me? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. Why don't you stay and watch this cartoon? I think it's quite interesting. Kiki also thought it was quite interesting. She couldn't take her eyes off the TV. However, in the United States, cartoons were all in English. He didn't know if Kiki could understand it. Zheng Yujie pouted and said, I don't watch cartoons. It's so childish. She looked at Kiki in Poplar Fruit's arms and knew that with Kiki there, nothing would happen tonight. So, she talked about business. By the way, I just called Apple. Zheng Yujie said, they heard that you're here, and they want to invite you to visit Apple. Also, what's the name of the CEO who replaced Steve Jobs? Cook. Poplar Fruit reminded her. Yes, Cook, he also wants to see you, Zheng Yujie said. Okay, when are we leaving? Poplar Fruit asked with interest. Tomorrow. The next day, Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie left the group and got on the plane from Big Apple to San Francisco. Poplar Fruit wanted to experience the cross-state train in the United States. In the end, Zheng Yujie told him with disdain that with the slow speed of the United States train, it would take at least 3 days to go from the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States. Poplar Fruit had no choice but to give up. After getting off the plane, Poplar Fruit and the rest took a car to Cupertino, where Apple was located. It was one of the core cities of the United States Silicon Valley. In the last century, Cupertino was just a small town. In the 20th century, with the rapid development of technology, Cupertino got on the train to spring. Its economy began to take off, and it became the 27th most livable small city in the United States and the second in California. As they arrived late, Poplar Fruit and the rest went to Apple's headquarters the next day. Unfortunately, the construction of Apple's spaceship headquarters building had not really started yet. Poplar Fruit could not see the legendary sci-fi building designed by Steve Jobs when he was alive. However, to be able to enter Apple, Poplar Fruit felt like it was a dream. Here, he saw a lot of technology that could only be seen in movies, such as smart homes, service robots, and the electric balance car that had just started to become popular in China. They could be seen everywhere. In Apple, there was a public relations manager who accompanied them all the way and introduced them to a lot of cool places in Apple. Of course, Poplar Fruit and the rest could not go to the core area of Apple's development of the iPhone and other products. This was not hard to imagine. After all, it could be said that there was a strict culture of confidentiality there. Cook actually only took 10 minutes to meet with Poplar Fruit and the rest. He did not make things very complicated with great fanfare. Poplar Fruit knew that he was not a big shot. He could not let the CEO of the world's largest company receive him as if he was receiving a national leader, right? Of course, Cook still gave people a very friendly feeling. It was just that he did not know if it was his own illusion, but Poplar Fruit always felt that Cook looked at him as if he was looking at a beautiful woman. He almost had goosebumps. From the short chat with Cook, Poplar Fruit felt that Cook did not come to thank him for translating Steve Jobs' biography. It seemed that Cook felt that he had done a very good job and wanted to get to know him. In his words, he revealed that he wanted to help him translate his biography in the future. Although he did not think much of it, Poplar Fruit still gave a very happy response. God knows if he could be a celebrity like Steve Jobs. God knows when he would be qualified to publish a biography. Anyway, it was not difficult to give a guarantee without any disadvantages to the CEO of such a big company, right? Chapter 236. After leaving Apple, Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie were nowhere to be found. Although California's Sunshine Coast was very famous, it was not a good idea to go to the beach in March when it was still a little cold. I want to go to Los Angeles. Zheng Yujie looked at Poplar Fruit and said, I have an aunt who lives there. Why don't you come along? In the end, Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie got into a car headed to Los Angeles. However, Poplar Fruit did not follow Zheng Yujie to her aunt's place. He suddenly remembered that he had a friend who lived near Los Angeles. Alan? Adeon? Ever since they met in Beijing last year, Poplar Fruit and Alan had chatted a few times online and even played games together. Alan had long urged Poplar Fruit to come over to his house. If Poplar Fruit did not mention Los Angeles, he would have forgotten about it. Alan lived in Irvine, a small city in Southern California that was not far from Los Angeles. This unknown small city had a world-famous gaming company like Blizzard in terms of business. There were also many semiconductor and computer industry giants in the Northern American headquarters. In terms of educational resources, there was a branch of the University of California. There were also countless outstanding high schools. According to the data, Irvine High School was ranked 8th in the list of the best high schools in America in 2011 and 2nd in the list of the best public high schools in America. Poplar Fruit carried his daughter and carried a huge backpack as he got into a taxi in Irvine. Although the driver of the taxi was a black man, he looked through the window and saw that most of the people on the streets of Irvine were Asian. This discovery shocked Poplar Fruit. He thought that there were enough Asians in Cupertino, but compared to this place, it was still lacking. Thinking about the pleasant climate, excellent school district, ideal security, and other factors, Poplar Fruit was relieved. Just the advantage of having a good school was enough to attract the Chinese to flock here. When they arrived, Alan warmly welcomed Poplar Fruit and Kiki. When they met, he gave them a big hug. However, Kiki was not very satisfied with this bearded uncle. She turned around and hugged her father, unwilling to pay attention to him. Alan smiled awkwardly. He had a falling out with his wife not long ago. His wife was angry and took his 2 children to Florida for a vacation. The life of a bachelor was a bit unrestrained. Poplar Fruit was surprised by Alan's house. Alan was a wealthy man with a net worth of tens of billions. His house was no different from an ordinary American's. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary 2-story building with its own lawn outside. From the inside, there was nothing special. It was no different from the movies. Of course, if there was anything special, it would be his super cool game room and living room. There were all kinds of game consoles, Wii, Xbox, PS3, and so on. As long as it could be seen in the market, it had everything. There was even a 3D game console set that was rarely known in the market. Alan had one too. Wow! Poplar Fruit exclaimed in Chinese. Bro, what you said on the internet is true. You really built a game arcade city. Of course, as a game enthusiast, I won't save money for myself in this aspect, Alan said proudly. Hearing this, Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes. Save money? The expenses here are not even a fraction of your account, right? I really don't know where he spends all his money. However, looking at Alan's living room, Poplar Fruit had a vague understanding of the reason why Alan and his wife fell out. In Alan's house, Poplar Fruit was more at ease. Although it was a little messy, there might be a housekeeper cleaning it every day, so it wouldn't be littered with garbage. Sitting on the sofa in the living room, Poplar Fruit moved his butt. It was so comfortable that he wanted to cry out. It seemed that they were all very expensive goods. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so soft and bouncy when sitting on it. Poplar Fruit looked around. Alan shaved his beard and came out. Looking at Poplar Fruit, he asked curiously, "What are you looking for?" Poplar Fruit said, "I'm looking to see if your house is like Bill Gates, hiding some high-tech products in a low-key way." Alan curled his lips and said, "Don't look for it. I'm not a geek. I'm only interested in games. I won't look at anything else if it's placed in front of me." It seemed to be true. He pulled out a crib from the bedroom downstairs and asked Poplar Fruit to put Kiki in. "Don't hold your daughter. We men need a little space. Come on, join Alan's gaming party." Poplar Fruit had been itching for a long time. He put his daughter in, but after thinking about it, he asked Alan to find a coat and a few toys. The toys were for Kiki to play with, and the coat was used to cover the front of the crib. This way, Alan's 2K TV screen wouldn't flash Kiki's young eyes. "Let's go." Alan waved the Wii stick, and a whip came down from the TV and hit the horse he was controlling. The horse raised its front legs high, whistled, and rushed forward. It was Poplar Fruit's first time playing these home games. Although he had seen them in videos before, it still took some time for him to get used to it. After spending more than 20 minutes learning how to play, Poplar Fruit finally got used to it. Why was it a gaming party? Because the two of them changed the game consoles and jumped through the catalog. In 5 hours, they played more than 40 games, not including the intermission time, when they were feeding Kiki. The two of them had a 50% chance of winning. This didn't mean that the two of them were equal in strength. On the contrary, the difference in strength between the two of them was very clear. Poplar Fruit could be said to have a complete victory in games that required a lot of manipulation, such as shooting, action, racing, and so on. However, when it came to RPG and strategy games, Alan could often win. In the beginning, Alan had a good time torturing Poplar Fruit. Later, he felt more and more that teaching Poplar Fruit to play home games was a big mistake. It was like inviting a wolf into the house. "I'm not playing anymore." Alan threw away the remote control in his hand and lied on the sofa. His character had been shot in the head by Poplar Fruit for the nth time. Alan looked at the screen full of blood with tears streaming down his face. He decided to give up playing with Poplar Fruit, this pervert. If he didn't give up, then he would be a fool. Poplar Fruit smirked at the side. "Don't be so proud," Alan shouted. "Tomorrow I'll take you to the shooting range to see a real gun. Alan's shooting skills will make you call me Daddy." He actually learned a tongue twister from a black singer. Poplar Fruit snickered in his heart. It wasn't like he hadn't been to the shooting range. It wasn't like he hadn't touched a real gun. Compared to the real gun, he didn't know who would call him Daddy. Everyone, use your votes to smash the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 237. Let's go. Alan lay down and picked up his jacket from the other side of the sofa. He stood up and said, "I'll take you to dinner." If Alan was alone, he could have just ordered a pizza delivery. However, he had friends from afar today. He couldn't possibly ask Poplar Fruit to eat pizza with him, could he? He had already thought about it. There was a Mexican restaurant in the city that tasted great. It would be good to take Poplar Fruit there to try it out. Poplar Fruit nodded. He picked up Kiki, stuffed a bag of diapers into his trouser pocket, and followed Alan out of the door. When he opened the door, the lawn outside was dyed with the afterglow of the setting sun. The whole street was empty, and there were only a few white pigeons singing on the telephone poles. However, as soon as he walked out of the door, Poplar Fruit felt like he was being peeped at. This time, the feeling of being peeped at was even stronger than before. Before he could come back to his senses to investigate the source, a sense of crisis emerged in his heart. It was a sense of crisis that made his soul fly out of his body. All the movements seemed to be done subconsciously. Poplar Fruit hugged his daughter tightly with one hand and pulled Alan back by the collar with the other. Both of them fell on the steps of the corridor outside the door. With a loud bang, a hole exploded in the door behind them. The wooden stubble was a little charred, and the wisps of black smoke told them that the hole had just appeared. "Be careful," Poplar Fruit murmured what he wanted to say. Alan, who was dizzy from the fall, still hadn't come back to his senses. Bang! Bang! There were two loud bangs. The bullets hit the stone pillars and railings in the corridor, and the broken stones fell to the ground, crashing nonstop. Poplar Fruit hugged his daughter to his chest, turned over, and used his body to block the falling stones. Then he quickly dragged Alan, who was screaming nonstop, and crawled back. Bullets whistled through the air, windows and flower pots were smashed, and the white pigeons flew away in fright. These scenes that could only be seen in movies were actually happening right next to him. Poplar Fruit's mind went blank. He could only instinctively drag Aaron to a safer place, praying that no bullets would fall on him. Hiding in the house, Poplar Fruit dragged Alan behind the sofa, shook his shoulder, and shouted, "Alan, Alan, where are you hurt?" Only then did Alan come back to his senses. He rubbed his eyes and touched his body. Panting, he said, "No, I'm not hurt." Perhaps a small stone had splashed into his eyes. What the fuck is this? Poplar Fruit patted the floor in panic and cursed, "Alan, I think you should call 911. Otherwise, when the police come, they can only collect our corpses." Kiki was so scared that she buried her head in her father's arms, trembling nonstop. Poplar Fruit hugged her tighter. Perhaps she would feel more at ease if she heard her father's heartbeat. But her father's heartbeat was messed up too. Poplar Fruit was not Superman. Although he had captured armed robbers before, he had never been so close to death. If he had reacted a little slower with the first bullet, he or Alan would have died. Yes, they would have died without a doubt. Just look at the big hole that the bullet had made in the door. Alan nodded and took out his phone while trembling. He dialed the U.S. police number and told them about the situation of the gunshot attack and his location. He shouted, "I have already told Director Frank that it was not a prank, but you didn't believe me. Now, did you hear the gunshots? SVD, do you know? If you don't come, I will be dead, and you will be in the newspapers tomorrow." It turned out that Alan had received several death threats before. The bloody letter scared him, but the director of the police station told him that it was just chicken blood, so he didn't have to be too nervous. "I told you." Alan hid behind the sofa, helplessly, listening to the assassin outside, shooting the window into pieces. He scolded, "Warcraft can't be updated with a new version. That's something we can't do. We have done everything we can, but if we can't do it, we can't do it. Do you think killing me will work?" Poplar Fruit gently put his daughter on the sofa, then turned over, wanting to close the door. Just as he poked his head out, Poplar Fruit saw a man in black across the street with a pistol out and walking towards him. Shocked, Poplar Fruit quickly hooked the door with his foot, then scrambled away. Just as he dodged, there were a few more holes in the door, and then the man in black shot the door lock away with a precise shot. Looking at this power, it was estimated that it was a Desert Eagle. This made Poplar Fruit helpless. What was the use of his martial arts? In front of an unreasonable gun, would he still have a chance to use his fists and feet? He was afraid that if he rushed out, there would be a few more holes in his body. Fuck! Poplar Fruit crawled back, held his daughter in his arms, and scolded, "He is coming." Poplar Fruit pushed Alan and asked, "Is there a basement? Let's go in and hide. When the police come, we will be safe." Alan put the phone back in his pocket. He finally calmed down, pulled Poplar Fruit, and said, "Let's go. Come with me." Poplar Fruit held his daughter and followed Alan. As a result, they came to the bedroom behind the living room. "Is there a secret room here?" Poplar Fruit looked at Alan, touching the bookshelf, and asked doubtfully, "Could there really be a secret room?" Poplar Fruit thought of a scene in a movie. Monopoly pulled out a book from the bookshelf, and then the bookshelf moved in two, revealing a door to the secret room. It turned out that Poplar Fruit thought too much. Why would a person like Alan, who was only obsessed with games, go through so much trouble to make himself a useless secret room? He tiptoed for a while, and finally took down an iron box on the top of the bookshelf. There was nothing strange about the box. It was just an ordinary biscuit box. However, after Alan opened the lid, a dark pistol revealed its charming figure. Glock. As a shooting game enthusiast, Poplar Fruit was no stranger to this gun. It was a military pistol of a NATO member state, and in the United States, almost 50% of the police were equipped with this pistol. That's right. Alan smiled coldly and said, "This is a Glock. Today I will use it to get rid of this damn home invader." Suddenly, Alan seemed to have integrated himself into his fantasy game scene, but he did not know where his confidence came from. He held the gun and was ready to walk out. "Leon!" Alan turned around and looked at Poplar Fruit, who was about to speak, and said, "You and your daughter are hiding here. If I don't ask you to open the door, don't open it." Alan is about to go out and show off his skills. His eyes were filled with the fanaticism of a Western cowboy. A new month, a new week, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 238. Alan closed the door and walked out without saying anything. Poplar Fruit couldn't be at ease. Alan was just an ordinary person who wasn't as thin as Jean known. There were professional killers outside with large caliber weapons. Could he go out and kill them? Poplar Fruit didn't think so. He looked around the bedroom downstairs. There was only an empty bed and a desk. There wasn't even a window to climb out of. It was no different from a storage room. Poplar Fruit gritted his teeth and hid his daughter at the foot of the bed. He steeled his heart, turned around, pushed open the door, and walked out. When he walked out, he even closed the door. As soon as he walked out, he saw Alan leaning against the support pillar of the stairs, waving his pistol and shooting at the door. The gunshots kept ringing out, but Poplar Fruit took a closer look and saw that Alan had shot all the bullets askew. The bullets hit the sofa cushions, shattered the light bulb on the top, and collapsed the shoe cabinet at the door, but the door was still standing. There wasn't even a new hole. He turned to look at Alan. His eyes were closed, and his unrestrained shouts were even louder than the sound of the pistol. No wonder he couldn't hit him. In this state, it would be a miracle to hit him. At this time, Poplar Fruit caught a glimpse of the door that had been kicked open. A black gun barrel reached in. Poplar Fruit was shocked. He dragged Alan, who was completely out of control, to the ground. At this time, two large holes burst out of the wall behind them. Too powerful. Alan shouted on the ground in panic. "He's unstoppable. We're dead." Poplar Fruit didn't have time to care about him. He felt a sense of crisis that made his temples jump. He immediately pulled Alan and rolled on the ground. Rows of bullets shot at the place where they had just been lying. At this time, the other party had no bullets, but Poplar Fruit could hear the sound of the person reloading the magazine was very consistent. He might not be as good as Xiong 3, but he had no chance to take him down empty-handed. "Runs!" Alan desperately pulled Poplar Fruit along the stairs to hide on the second floor. He rolled and crawled, pulling Poplar Fruit to hide in the corner. He gestured with his hands in front of his chest and prayed to God. "God, please keep me alive until the police arrive." At this moment, Poplar Fruit, who had yet to catch his breath, suddenly remembered, "Our daughter is still downstairs. God, how did he become a father?" He left his daughter in a dangerous place. Alan pulled out the magazine, looked at it, and said in a low voice with a sad face, "I just fired too many shots, and now I have a bullet. Give it to me." Poplar Fruit grabbed the pistol and rushed downstairs. Ellen quickly pulled him back and shouted, "What are you doing? Going down is suicide." Poplar Fruit turned around and grabbed Ellen's collar. He stared at him fiercely with bloodshot eyes and roared, "My daughter is still down there." At this moment, his red-eyed aura was like a ferocious beast that wanted to devour everyone in front of him. Ellen was trembling in fear, but Poplar Fruit did not push him away. Instead, he suddenly pulled him to the side. It turned out that their voices were heard by the killer. He raised his hand and fired continuously into the corridor. Poplar Fruit and the others almost died in the internal strife. Wah wah! After the gunshots, Kiki's cries came from the bedroom downstairs. Even though there was a door between them, her cries were so obvious in the dead silence that everyone held their breaths. Poplar Fruit listened with worry, but the killer obviously heard it too. Don't panic. Don't panic. Take a deep breath. Yanghua leaned against the pillar at the corner of the stairs and forced herself to calm down. Her heart was beating wildly and her mind was in a mess. There was only one bullet, only one chance. Poplar Fruit forced himself to forget the heavy pressure. His internal strength followed his thoughts, and he suddenly entered that mysterious state. The world seemed to be very quiet. It was so quiet that even a needle dropping on the ground could be heard. Yes, Poplar Fruit could hear the killer's heavy breathing through the veil. He could even see the killer's every move in his mind. This state could not be explained by science. And Poplar Fruit did not care whether it was fucking scientific or not. He stared at the killer closely. He saw that the killer's muzzle was pointing upstairs, but he stopped moving and turned to look at the bedroom downstairs. The killer looked upstairs again and took 2 steps back. His footsteps were almost inaudible. Then he turned around and walked towards the bedroom. The moment he turned around, Poplar Fruit seemed to have heard the signal of the starting gun. He flashed out from the corner of the stairs. In the blink of an eye, the moment Yanghua flashed out, the assassin also felt it. But when he turned his gun back, it was already too late. Poplar Fruit's reaction speed was faster than the king of the special forces. He pulled the trigger first. His hand was very steady, steadier than ever. Those few microseconds seemed to be very long. Poplar Fruit could feel the sparks of the bullet when it left the chamber. He could also feel that at the other end of the bullet, the killer's dilated pupils were exposed. It was the first time he fired without earmuffs. The gunshot exploded in his ears and was almost deafening. However, Poplar Fruit was not affected. He was still in that mysterious state. Although he had already seen it, he still rushed down to confirm that the killer who had fallen to the ground was indeed dead. He was indeed dead. There was a scorch hole in the forehead of the hood, and the blue eyes had lost the light of life. Killed another person. This sentence flashed through his mind. Poplar Fruit suddenly slumped to the ground. His whole body was weak, and the hand holding the gun was sweaty. The world seemed to have become so unreal. It was both far and near. His ears seemed to have only just started to show the after effects of the gunshot. The whole world seemed to be left with only the noise of radio waves. It was not until Kiki's helpless and fearful cries rang out again that Poplar Fruit gradually came back to his senses. Yes, my daughter is still in the room. Leon! Leon! At this time, Alan, who was cowering in the corner, cried out in fear. He did not dare to move now, and he did not know what was going on below. He could only call out to Poplar Fruit with a trembling voice and wait for his response. He has been taken care of. Poplar Fruit's slightly tired voice was undoubtedly the sound of nature in Alan's ears. Just now, Poplar Fruit did not respond for a long time. He thought that Poplar Fruit was dead, and those damn tears were about to flow out. Alan struggled and stood up with the help of the wall. He looked at Poplar Fruit, who had also just gotten up from the ground, and the black figure on the ground that was half covered by Poplar Fruit's body. The two who had survived the disaster looked at each other in a daze. They did not know why, but they actually laughed. Everyone, use your votes to smash the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 239. The police were always the last to arrive. This unchanging truth was not only applicable to China, but also to America. Poplar Fruit and the rest had just stood up when the alarm rang outside. Many police cars screeched and screeched as they braked. Immediately, a team of armed policemen with shields kicked open the door and rushed in. Put down the gun! I repeat, put down the gun! The leading policeman shouted nervously. Poplar Fruit quickly threw the gun in his hand to the ground. Although there was not a single bullet in the gun, the police did not know that. He did not want to be killed by the police. Poplar Fruit raised both his hands to show his innocence. However, 2 policemen rushed up and pinned Poplar Fruit to the ground. With these 2 men's clumsy movements, Yangguo was confident that he had 100 ways to beat them to the ground. But now that he was being pointed at by a gun, he could only obediently be pressed down with his arms behind his back. "Hey!" Alan hurriedly ran down and shouted, "You've got the wrong person. You've got the wrong person. This is my friend. The one on the ground is the one who wants to kill me." At this moment, Alan lowered his head and saw the assassin in black on the ground. The assassin's eyes were still open in disbelief. The small hole on his forehead was gurgling, and the ground was covered in red and white. Seeing this scene, Alan, whose heart was still as pure as a little white flower, could not help but retch while leaning against the wall. Among the policemen who rushed in, one of them knew Alan. After hearing his explanation, he quickly asked his partner to let go of Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit did not have the time to argue with him about why they pinned him down without any reason. He rushed back to the bedroom downstairs and hugged Kiki, who was already crying. Kiki was frightened by the terrifying gunshots and screams. Moreover, her father was not by her side just now. Now that she was being hugged by her father, she cried even harder. Poplar Fruit hugged his daughter tightly and kissed her forehead. He said regretfully, "It's all Dad's fault. It's all Dad's fault. Dad shouldn't have left you behind. Shouldn't have left you in a dangerous place. Dad promises that I will never leave Kiki again. Okay?" Back in the living room, Poplar Fruit covered Kiki's eyes with his hand, afraid that she would see something terrifying. At this moment, Alan, who was fully revived, was jumping up and down to the police station's chief, Frank, to describe the dangerous situation just now. "You don't know how powerful this assassin is. The gun flew past my ear. If it wasn't for my luck, if it wasn't for my friend Leon, I would have died. Look at these bullet marks, my game console." Alan exaggerated, waved his hands as he said, "Is this a normal prank? I already said that it was a death threat letter. He really wanted to take my life." Poplar Fruit could see the helpless look on Chief Frank's face under Alan's saliva. However, he was the one at fault, so he didn't dare to wipe it off. Although the officialdom in the United States was not as decadent as in China, a superstar company like Blizzard was considered a signboard in a small city like Erewhon. If one of its bosses was assassinated because he did not protect them well, then Director Frank would have to take the blame and resign the next day without needing any orders from the higher-ups. "I guess there might be accomplices around here," Alan said seriously. "You have to search carefully." Chief Frank comforted, "Don't worry, we will increase the police force to search. However, according to the current situation, we have already found the sniper rifle that he left on top of a building." "What do you mean?" Alan asked, puzzled. "This basically proves that he doesn't have any other gang. He's alone," Chief Frank said. Poplar Fruit hugged his daughter and nodded slightly. He also agreed with Chief Frank's point of view. If the black-clothed assassin had an accomplice, he definitely wouldn't have let go of Poplar Fruit when he was at his weakest. The police investigated for a while and found that they couldn't find any information from the black-clothed assassin. Then, they linked it to Alan's police report about the death threat letter not long ago. The police temporarily thought that this was a follow-up to the death threat letter. Unknowingly, Poplar Fruit had already cleared himself of suspicion in this case. Of course, Poplar Fruit didn't think that this attack was actually related to him. Taking a statement was still necessary. Anyway, the house was almost destroyed, and he felt that it wasn't safe to stay at home. Hence, Alan promised Chief Frank to go back to the police station to take a statement. Poplar Fruit didn't care. He just wanted to find a safe place to sit down. So he also took his bag and went to the police station with Alan. When they arrived at the police station, Poplar Fruit first made a bottle of milk and gave it to Kiki to calm her nerves. Kiki was sleepy and fell asleep after drinking half the bottle. Poplar Fruit asked a female police officer who was full of maternal love to take care of him for a while. Then, he followed a detective to the quiet room next door to take a statement. Because of Alan's relationship with Poplar Fruit, the detective was very amiable when he was taking a statement with him. "Please show me your driver's license or give me your social security number." Poplar Fruit was stunned. He smiled and said, Oh, you misunderstood. I'm not an American. I'm from China. This is my passport." He took out his passport from his bag and handed it over. "It's hard to imagine that you're not an American. Your English is no different from ours. The detective looked at Poplar Fruit's passport and sighed. That's because I'm a professional translator. Poplar Fruit shrugged and smiled. Language is the tool that I rely on for a living. You're not a professional soldier? Or a retired soldier? The detective asked in shock. His eyes were wide open. No. Poplar Fruit asked in confusion. Why do you think so? I've never been a soldier, nor have I been in a profession like a soldier or a police officer. Unbelievable. Your marksmanship is so good. One shot to the head. If you're not a professional soldier, that's too amazing. The detective shook his head. This guy's marksmanship is so good. He must have practiced it while playing games. Alan, who had just finished his call, opened the door and heard the detective's words. He said resentfully, it's the same when he's playing games. Every shot to the head. He doesn't give anyone a chance. Who said that I practiced it while playing games? Poplar Fruit said in dissatisfaction. I've been to the shooting range in China. It's just that I'm not like you, who practiced until the bullets hit the ceiling. I'm just nervous. Nervous, do you understand? Alan said in embarrassment. Why don't we go to the shooting range and have a fair duel? The detective waited for the two of them to compare with each other for a while before he interrupted and pulled Lou back. So, what you're saying is that you're a Chinese and a translator? Chapter 240. You're Chinese and you're a translator. So, are you here in the U.S. for a vacation? The inspector asked as he took notes with his pen. No, I'm here for business. Poplar Fruit shook his head. Business? The inspector picked up Poplar Fruit's passport again and realized it was a business visa. Yes, I'm here with a business team from a publishing company to discuss the import of a book. Poplar Fruit rummaged through his bag and found some documents that could prove his identity and showed them to the inspector. The inspector flipped through the documents and pointed at the location. Aren't you negotiating in the Big Apple? Why are you here in Irvine? That's because I live in Irvine. He purposely came to visit me. Alan interrupted. Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes and said, No, it's because our negotiation is not over yet. The other party needs to conduct a business investigation before making a decision. He's coming to California for a lecture tour according to his itinerary. That's why we followed him here. As for Irvine, I suddenly remembered Alan lives here, so I came to visit him. Purposely and on the way. What a difference. That's so hurtful. Alan sighed. To think that I invited you so many times, but you only came here because it's on the way. Isn't it on the way? I even saved your life along the way. Yongwa curled her lips and said. The inspector asked Poplar Fruit a few more questions before letting the two of them out. The police station was on duty 24 hours a day. Alan felt uneasy going to a hotel, so he borrowed a quiet office from Frank to rest. Her daughter was lying on the side. Yongwa covered her with a small quilt that she brought with her from her school bag, while he ate takeout with Alan. That's right. After all that, they still ordered pizza. The pizza in America had a lot more fillings compared to Poplar Fruit in China. Meat, tomatoes, and other fillings were everywhere in one bite. Of course, the pizza in the U.S. was not as good as the pizza in China. The pizza in the U.S. tasted bland and was not as delicious as the pizza in China. He didn't know if he was hungry, but Poplar Fruit ate faster, while Alan ate slowly as if he was tasting something delicious. Poplar Fruit washed her hands and began to tidy up the school bag that was messed up when she flipped through the quilt. What is this? Alan's sharp eyes saw that the Poplar Fruit had fallen out of a transparent box containing something that looked like a postcard. On it, there seemed to be a picture from the Warcraft game. Pa! Poplar Fruit slapped away Alan's greasy claws in disdain and said, Don't touch it. You haven't washed your hands yet. Alan, on the other hand, was even more interested. He finished the remaining small piece of pizza, ran to wash his hands, and then came over excitedly. What is it? Poplar Fruit handed him a tissue to let him wipe his hands, then carefully opened the box and took out the cards to show him. Poplar Fruit looked at Alan, quickly looking at the cards one by one, and said with some heartache, Hey, be careful. Don't break it. In fact, this set of cards was not worth much, but thinking that it was a pair with the set beside Fong Beibei, Poplar Fruit cherished it very much. Looking at the way he carried it with him, one could guess 1, 2, 3, 3. Where did this come from? Alan asked doubtfully. I have never seen these things before. Poplar Fruit said with a little pride. This is a card game based on the Warcraft background. A game I made with a friend. Alan looked at his peach blossom face and said with a smile, girlfriend? Poplar Fruit said with a red face, a female friend. Alan did not continue to ask. He was not a gossipy person, and games were all he cared about. He pulled Poplar Fruit's clothes and let Poplar Fruit explain to him how to play. His voice was a little loud, and Poplar Fruit glared at him, afraid that he would disturb his sleeping daughter, who was still trembling slightly. Staying in the police station was quite boring, and there was no computer or game console to pass the time. Poplar Fruit explained the card game to Alan. First, you have to choose 30 cards from this set as your own card set. Poplar Fruit whispered. When Poplar Fruit was explaining, Alan's eyes were wide open, and he kept exclaiming in a low voice, unbelievable, unbelievable. Alan was not an inhuman with boundless energy like Poplar Fruit. After a day of torment and struggling on the edge of life and death, he was already a little sleepy, and his eyes were bloodshot. However, listening to a brand new game, Alan radiated with new vitality. Looking at his energetic appearance, it was hard to imagine that he had not slept for more than 10 or 20 hours. Poplar Fruit did not know and continued to chat with him. In the end, as they chatted, Alan suddenly fell asleep on the table without warning, and it gave Poplar Fruit a fright. Alan did not sleep for long, and even Poplar Fruit had just woken up from his 3 hours of sleep. After Alan woke up, he rubbed his face with his hands to force himself to be more alert. He was thinking about this game, even in his dreams. Seeing Poplar Fruit sitting next to him and smiling, Alan jumped up and pulled Poplar Fruit's clothes and whispered, "Quick, let's play your game." Poplar Fruit waved his hand and said, "I can't play. This card needs 2 sets to play, and I only have 1 set. The other one is still in China." "Are both of them the same?" Alan asked. "They are exactly the same," Poplar Fruit said. "That's easy." After hearing Poplar Fruit's answer, Alan jumped up and ran to the police on duty. He paid for the right to use the police station's printer to print crime scene photos. He printed all the cards in Poplar Fruit's hands. Of course, the printer was a large-size photo, which was bigger than A4 paper. Therefore, he looked particularly funny holding the new cards. Poplar Fruit's own cards were the same size as a movie star, and it was already quite big, but Alan's was even bigger. However, Alan, who was in high spirits, could not care less. He pulled Poplar Fruit to play. It was his first time playing the game, and Alan was not completely familiar with it. Most of the time, he played while asking Poplar Fruit. In the end, he kept losing, but he was never tired of losing. Of course, Poplar Fruit was willing to continue playing. It was rare to find an opponent who could win. In the past, when he played with Fong Beibei, he almost always lost. Moreover, this opponent seemed to have a masochistic tendency. He could not be happier. At this time, Alan was not playing the game to win, but to study a new game. His vision was much more experienced. After playing a few rounds, he pointed out many loopholes in the game and many places that affected the balance. Poplar Fruit nodded secretly and silently noted it down. He did not even think about these problems. Go back and tell Fong Beibei that she will definitely solve it. Everyone, use your votes to smash the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 241. They played until dawn, and the police officers who passed by on their way to work all looked at them strangely. They didn't go home, didn't stay in a hotel, but squatted in the police station to play cards. They were probably the only 2 people in the world who played cards bigger than A4 paper. The impact was not good. Director Frank couldn't help but knock on the door and come in. He wanted to persuade them to leave. Director Frank told them that there was a large group of reporters outside who wanted to report about the attack on Blizzard's boss. He could arrange for a police officer to secretly send them away in a police car. "Let's go." Poplar Fruit put away the card and smiled at Alan. "I think except for this, your home should be safe now." "Wait." Alan suddenly raised his hand and said to Director Frank, "Give me a little time." Director Frank nodded, turned around, and closed the door before leaving. Alan rushed up and took Poplar Fruit's hand. He said to Poplar Fruit excitedly, "Leon, we're good friends, right?" Poplar Fruit nodded doubtfully and said, "Yes, We are brothers who have gone through trials and tribulations together. He didn't think of how to translate the word brother with the same English word, so he just translated it casually. Alan looked at Poplar Fruit affectionately and said, Leon, since we are brothers, you must sell this game to me. Sell it to Blizzard. Oh my God, this is an epic-making great idea. Poplar Fruit was stunned. He and Fong Bei studied the game just to pass the time. They never thought of selling it for money, but Alan proposed to sell the game to Blizzard. Poplar Fruit couldn't believe his ears for a while. Could it be that the card game he casually designed was so good that it could enter Blizzard's eyes? Poplar Fruit understood that the card game was actually very simple. Even the pictures were downloaded from Chengdu Online, and there were so many loopholes. He asked with an incredible expression, You want to buy my game? Yes. Alan said, This card game is wonderful. I believe that after the company's in-depth development, it will definitely be popular. Sell it to me? I'll definitely get you the best price. It's not about money. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said awkwardly, My friend and I researched this game together. If you want to sell it, you have to get her permission. If Fong Bei did not agree, no matter what Alan said, Poplar Fruit would not agree. This was because this game was the crystallization of his and Fong Bei's wisdom. Ahem, although it sounded weird, that was what he meant. The Poplar Fruit was very precious to him. Hurry up and call her and ask her. When it came to games, Alan became impatient. He couldn't wait for Poplar Fruit to ask. Please, please, please. Poplar Fruit counted with his fingers. It should be around 10 p.m. Beijing time. Fong Bei should not be asleep yet, right? Although girls went to bed early, didn't they all go to bed late in the university? Poplar Fruit picked up his phone and called Fong Bei. At first, Fong Bei did not pick up and rejected the call. Poplar Fruit called again. When she picked up, Poplar Fruit quickly told her that it was him. Oh, it's you. Fong Bei laughed happily. Aren't you in the U.S.? Why are you calling me? I saw an unknown number and thought it was a harassment call. I'm calling you from the U.S. Huh? You haven't slept yet, right? Poplar Fruit laughed. He could hear Fong Bei's roommates cheering over the phone. Yo, Bei, who is this? Are you in the U.S.? I'm about to sleep. Wait for me. I'll talk to you when I'm out of the corridor. Fong Bei climbed down from her bed with her phone and made funny faces at her roommates. She did not answer them and kept them in suspense. All right, I'm out. Fong Bei stood in the corridor and asked as she paced back and forth. Uncle, why did you call me when you're in America? It's very expensive to make an overseas call. It's fine. It's just a few dozen RMB. Poplar Fruit laughed. Then, how's your matter going? When are you coming back? Fong Bei asked. Not bad. I'm still waiting for the final confirmation. I don't know when I will be back. I think it will take a few more days. Yangbo laughed. He turned his head and saw Aaron looking at him from the side. He couldn't understand Chinese, so he could only stare. However, he had a wretched look on his face as he eavesdropped. Yangwei used his right hand to push his head away. Alan was pushed away, but he was still shouting. How is it? Do you agree? Hey, why is there a foreign devil's voice beside you? Fong Bei asked doubtfully. Oh, it's like this. I have a friend who is one of the founders of Blizzard. His name is Adam. Poplar Fruit laughed. When he heard Poplar Fruit mention his name, Alan quickly shut his mouth. That magical beast was developed by his family. Poplar Fruit said, I accidentally let him see the card that I designed with you. He thought it was good and wanted to buy it. He kept pestering me, so I called to ask for your opinion. Before Fong Bei could respond, Poplar Fruit quickly added, If you don't want to sell it, just tell me. It's okay. I was forced to ask. Fong Bei laughed and said, If you think it's okay, then sell it. I don't have any objections. Our efforts can be appreciated by such a big company like Blizzard. It's a great achievement. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said, I don't have any objections if you agree. I was worried that you would say that the game was designed by the two of us and that you don't want to sell it. It's okay. Fong Bei laughed. It's great that more people can see it. But Fong Bei's tone suddenly became very serious. She said, You can't sell or lose the cards I gave you. It's the only one in the world. If you lose it, I won't talk to you anymore. I promise I won't lose it. Poplar Fruit suddenly straightened his chest and said, I have a good collection. I'm just teasing you. Fong Bebe laughed and said, That's it? I'm going to sleep. Wait, how much do you think we should sell it for? Poplar Fruit asked anxiously. You see. You decide. Fong Bebe said, Okay, we'll split it 50-50. Poplar Fruit said seriously. He always felt uncomfortable talking to Fong Bebe about money, but Poplar Fruit still wanted to make it clear. Didn't the people in his hometown always say, even brothers have to settle accounts clearly? Okay, uncle, you're so long-winded. Fong Bebe said, 50-50? The money we'll get from selling it won't even be as much as the phone bill. I'm going to sleep. Bye-bye. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 242. How is it? As soon as Poplar Fruit put down the phone, Alan couldn't wait to greet him and ask. Poplar Fruit deliberately put on a heavy expression, which made Alan's heart go up and down. He wanted to ask again with a sad face. At this time, Poplar Fruit put on a smile and said, We've decided to sell. Alan was stunned for a moment, then jumped up ecstatically and hugged Poplar Fruit tightly. He cheered loudly, Great, great! This is bad. Poplar Fruit didn't have time to cover Alan's mouth. He turned to look in the direction of his daughter's sleep. Sure enough, his daughter was woken up by Alan's loud voice. He didn't know if it was because yesterday's fright still left a shadow in her heart, but after being woken up by the shouting, Kiki burst into tears. Poplar Fruit quickly pushed the octopus away, ran over, and picked up his daughter. As he coaxed her, he looked at Alan reproachfully. Alan was so excited that he couldn't find the north. He didn't notice Poplar Fruit's eyes. He took out his phone and shouted, I'll ask you the price right away. Wait, I'll get you the best price. Chief Frank pushed the door open and came in. Alan waved his phone and gestured to Chief Frank. Wait a little longer. Wait a little longer. Poplar Fruit smiled helplessly at Chief Frank, then went to the bathroom of the police station to get some water for his daughter to wipe her face. After being chilled by the cold water, Kiki gradually woke up. She stopped crying and just hugged her father's neck tightly. After Kiki wiped her face, her hair was a little wet and curled up, tightly sticking to her cheeks and forehead. She looked very cute. Poplar Fruit kissed her little face, loving her very much. Back in the quiet room, Alan was still on the phone. He sometimes muttered, sometimes roared, sometimes stood against the back of the chair, sometimes jumped on the chair with shoes on, waving his arms as if he was giving a speech. Poplar Fruit shook his head, took out milk powder and a bottle from his bag, and went out again. He found a female police officer and asked her to help him get some hot water to make milk powder for his daughter. A faint fragrance floated out. Poplar Fruit's stomach suddenly growled. He only ate pizza yesterday, and today he was hungry too. Several police officers sitting next to Poplar Fruit laughed. They didn't have any malicious intentions. One of them was very friendly and handed the breakfast he brought over to Poplar Fruit and asked him if he wanted to eat it. Poplar Fruit ate one of his chicken pieces and gave it back to him and laughed. There is still one who hasn't eaten breakfast. My friend, you were so cool yesterday. A black police officer came up and lightly punched Poplar Fruit's arm. He laughed and said, I heard about it. One shot to the head. So cool. Poplar Fruit shrugged and joked with him for a while. When the takeout arrived, he took the takeout and walked back with Kiki in his arms. Alan's phone call lasted for more than half an hour. After he put down the phone, he excitedly said to Poplar Fruit, Leon, I finally talked to the board. They are willing to pay $6 million for your game. Poplar Fruit was about to sit down, but when he heard this, he stopped. He looked at Alan in a daze and couldn't believe his ears. $6 million? And it was in me gold? When Alan saw that Poplar Fruit didn't reply, he became anxious. He pulled Poplar Fruit's clothes and said, Leon, are you still not satisfied? This is really the highest price I can get. It was indeed the highest price. Seeing that Poplar Fruit had saved his life and that the game was really good, Alan tried his best to persuade the other board members. He spent a lot of effort to get Poplar Fruit this price. You have to know that the card game that you designed is just a prototype. After we take it over, We will have to invest a lot of money and go through a lot of post-development before we can launch it into the market. $6 million is already a very rare high price. Alan said anxiously. No, Alan. Poplar Fruit quickly held Alan, who was about to jump up and down, and said, I don't think it's too low. I think it's too high. $6 million. I won't be able to earn that much money even if I work as a translator for my whole life. Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he said, This number just scared me. So you're saying that you agree? Alan asked happily. Alan, Poplar Fruit said seriously, I know that it's not easy for you to get this price. You paid so much just to repay me for saving your life. But at that time, I killed him to save my daughter and also to save myself. So, don't bring trouble to yourself because of me. No. Alan shook his head like a rattle drum and said, I'm not just doing it to repay you. I'm doing it because this game is worth my effort. You know my character. If it's not a good game, I'll never let the company import it. Even if you kill me, I won't do it. As for the price, I admit that if it were someone else, I definitely wouldn't offer such a high price. I might even ask the company's professional negotiation team to lower the price. However, you have to understand that I'm only helping you to get the benefits that you deserve. Your game is really worth that much money, Alan said to Poplar Fruit seriously. Poplar Fruit was still a little hesitant. He said, Isn't this too high? Don't worry. Alan stretched out his hand and patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder hard. He said, My vision is not wrong. This game is worth investing a lot of money in, and in the future, it will double for us. Poplar Fruit felt like he was dreaming when he got such a price. However, when he pinched his thigh, it still hurt. He wanted to call Fong Beibei to discuss it again, but when he looked at the time, it was already late at night in China. It was definitely not appropriate to call back, and Fong Beibei had said that he would make the decision himself. So, he had to make the decision himself. In fact, there was nothing to do. In the face of such a high price, Poplar Fruit couldn't think of any reason to refuse. He nodded to Alan and said, Well, $6 million sold to Blizzard. Alan cheered happily. Poplar Fruit quickly pulled him back and said, Wait a minute. Alan asked doubtfully, Do you have any other conditions? Poplar Fruit nodded and said, Yes, I can sell you the card game, but I can't give you this set of cards. This is very important to me. He shook the set of cards that Fong Beibei had given him and Alan. Alan laughed and said, Look at how nervous you are. Don't worry, I don't want your cards. I just want your idea. By the way, Alan suddenly remembered and asked, What's the name of this game? Poplar Fruit pondered for a moment, then looked up and said with a smile, Heroes _of Warcraft. Chapter 243. After hurriedly eating breakfast, Alan couldn't wait to drag Poplar Fruit into the police car and went straight to Blizzard. After entering the gate, many people saw Alan and exchanged a few pleasantries with him, asking if he was well. This morning, the news of Alan's attack spread. If he wasn't okay, someone would have run to see him with flowers. Blizzard was very low-key, and no reporters could even enter the company. Poplar Fruit was the first time he saw Blizzard, even on the internet. Compared with Apple, Blizzard's overall decoration was not so high-tech, but it was not bad. What impressed Poplar Fruit the most was Blizzard's pantry and lounge. There would be 1 or 2 such places on each floor. Warm decorations and rich snacks and drinks were not what impressed Poplar Fruit. What Poplar Fruit found amazing was that Blizzard's employees were also discussing game design or programming in low voices in the pantry and lounge. Everyone was in high spirits, as if they had been injected with chicken blood. This made Poplar Fruit doubt his own cognition. Weren't programmers very bitter? This reminded Poplar Fruit of a report he had seen before, saying that when Blizzard recruited employees, the first thing they didn't want was those who didn't love games. Perhaps it was the obsession with games that formed such a strong working atmosphere in the company. In the report, many senior managers expressed such feelings. In addition to family, the happiest thing for me is to develop games for the company. Similarly, in the eyes of Blizzard's employees, games were not only a job, but also a way of life. Poplar Fruit felt that this selfless spirit of work was reflected in every employee of Blizzard. Blizzard's people almost reached a paranoia for their career. When he mentioned this discovery to Alan, Alan proudly said to Poplar Fruit, "Yes, this is the soul of Blizzard. Leon, I want to introduce you to someone." Alan smiled and said to Poplar Fruit when he saw a person coming from afar, "Mike? Mike Morhaime, my best brother and the current CEO of Blizzard." "Thank God." As soon as Mike came up, he gave Alan a bear hug and said, "Fortunately, you're fine. I was shocked when I heard about this. Why didn't you inform me yesterday?" Poplar Fruit carefully looked at the leader of Blizzard. He was a very handsome American. Even if he was already a middle-aged uncle, Poplar Fruit did not doubt that this face could make women scream. "I'm fine, aren't I?" Alan laughed. "Don't make a fuss. By the way, this is the Leon I told you about on the phone. He saved my life yesterday. Mr. Leon, thank you very much too." Mike shook Poplar Fruit's hand and said, "Welcome to Blizzard. I heard from Alan that you've brought us a great game. These two guys are really a Blizzard gay duo." Poplar Fruit cursed silently. It was as if the two of them were made from the same mold. After exchanging a few words, the conversation immediately shifted to the game. "Nice to meet you too. Can I call you Mike?" After Poplar Fruit got permission, he smiled and said, "I don't dare to say that it's great. This is just a game that my friends and I came up with to pass the time." Although he knew that there was no need to be modest in front of foreigners, modesty was a good character buried in the bones of Chinese people. Mike did not care whether he was modest or not. He smiled and said, "No problem. We are waiting for your demonstration." Let me say it. Let me say it," Alan said excitedly. "I already know what this game is like. Let me introduce it to everyone. Leon, is that okay? You can guide me from the side. If there is anything missing, you can add it." He was holding his daughter, so it was inconvenient for him to do the demonstration. Alan volunteered, and Poplar Fruit could not ask for more. He nodded gently. When they entered the conference room, several executives were already sitting there. They were also having a network meeting with the foreign directors through video connection. Alan explained to them that because it was a last-minute idea, the executives also acquiesced to Poplar Fruit bringing his daughter in for the meeting. Alan used the projector to play the cards that he photocopied last night on the screen, and then explained with joy. Poplar Fruit listened from the side and could not help but nod secretly. After all, Alan was a professional. His explanation was clear and to the point. He was much better than Poplar Fruit himself. "Did you say anything?" Alan turned his head and asked Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit smiled and shook his head, saying, "No, you said everything." Not only did he say everything, but he also filled in some of the loopholes he found yesterday, and said it as Poplar Fruit. "That's it. What do you think?" Alan put down the pen in his hand and said, "It's really good." A vice president named Pardo stood up and clapped. The others also applauded. Who was Pardo? In 2006, he was selected as one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine. And this reputation came from the epic-making World of Warcraft that he, as the chief designer, launched and was sought after by countless people all over the world. He and Ali were both extremely obsessed with games, and his judgment and analysis of games were praised by Blizzard as holy scriptures. This game, although there are still many areas to be improved, it is indeed a fascinating game. I believe many people will like it," Pardo said excitedly, "and it is based on the background of World of Warcraft. If it is released, there will be many fans of World of Warcraft screaming." Mike calmed down a lot. He carefully looked at the cards that Alan put on the table, raised his head, and said to the directors and executives of Blizzard present, "Gentlemen, I don't know if you have noticed, but this game is also suitable to be played on mobile." Poplar Fruit said in his heart, "Of course. Isn't Legend of the Three Kingdoms very popular on mobile and tablet?" He didn't know how much Mike's words meant to the people of Blizzard. Blizzard's games were mainly focused on the PC. In the mobile game market, although many games had tried to be transplanted, they didn't achieve good results. After all, mobile games and PC games were two different concepts, and the way to operate was also different. Compared to the PC market, Blizzard's development in the mobile market was disappointing. However, the mobile game market was developing rapidly, and it was already a big cake that even Blizzard couldn't ignore. If they couldn't achieve results, they would be abandoned by the times. Pardo was a little excited, and even a little carried away. He said, "That's right, we must buy this game. The 6 million miles Gene spent is too worth it. I think we can accept another 2 million. When he said this, the whole room was silent. This executive, who was obsessed with design and technology, seemed to have forgotten that this game hadn't been officially sold yet, and the owner himself, Poplar Fruit, was sitting in front of him. Xiaohan's birthday is tomorrow. Shamelessly asking for blessings. Intersection_intersection O. Chapter 244. All the directors and executives looked at Pardo. He had also realized his mistake. His chubby face revealed an awkward expression as he stood there, feeling extremely uncomfortable. Mike's hand that was holding the card also stopped. His other hand that was supporting his cheek rubbed his temples. On one hand, he was speechless at Pardo's recklessness. On the other hand, he had a headache thinking about countermeasures. Alan sat next to him and wanted to say something. He wanted to fight for more benefits for Poplar Fruit, but the company didn't belong to him alone. If he used Mike's big shot as a bargaining chip to force the company, then wouldn't everyone be able to continue to have fun in the future? Poplar Fruit was the first to speak. As soon as he spoke, everyone's eyes were focused on him. Kiki was so scared that she hid her head in her father's arms. Poplar Fruit laughed dryly and said, "I think that the price of 6 million that Alan mentioned before is very reasonable. There is no need to increase it further. Moreover, I have already agreed to Alan's offer." His words were completely out of everyone's expectations. When Poplar Fruit spoke just now, the directors thought that Poplar Fruit was going to use Pardo's words as a bargaining chip to force Blizzard to increase their offer. If that was really the case, Mike knew that he would probably still agree because this game was indeed worth their investment. However, there was someone who actually didn't want the opportunity to get more money. Poplar Fruit's words had overturned their understanding. In a capitalist society, business was business. How could there be someone who was emotionally swayed and gave up $2 million just like that? All the Blizzard executives and directors had different expressions on their faces, especially Pardo. His shock was mixed with a look of gratitude. There was nothing much to say. Since the parties involved didn't want to increase the price, Blizzard wasn't stupid enough to ask why. They let the legal department draft a contract and let Poplar Fruit sign it. Poplar Fruit hesitated for a moment and let them add Fong Beibei's name. There are some loopholes here. Don't take it too seriously. After signing, Mike held Poplar Fruit's hand and said solemnly, "Leon, your creativity is very important to our company, and your sincerity and kindness are very precious to us. In the future, you will always be a good friend of Blizzard, and you will always be a good friend of mine. You will be a good friend of Mohammy's. I can also solemnly promise you that in the future, if Blizzard wants to buy your new game, we will give you the most sincere price. Even if Blizzard doesn't buy it, it may be because of the different game concepts. We will provide you with publicity channels to help our friends grow." After listening to this long speech, Yonghua couldn't help but silently curse. Was it useful for Mike to make such a promise? He was a translator. In the future, he would be an excellent teacher. He would be a professional gamer. He would be to them, and Blizzard, on the other hand, they would help him? That was the wrong thing to say. Poplar Fruit borrowed a computer and sorted out all the game information for them on the spot. After all, the copy in Alan's hand was in Chinese, and Poplar Fruit translated it for them for free. In terms of games, Poplar Fruit couldn't be compared to them. But in terms of writing skills, no one in Blizzard could surpass Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit typed as he sorted out hundreds of pages of information. He finished it in less than an hour. The sound of the keyboard as he typed shocked Alan to say that he was a humanoid computer. As for Kiki, several blonde beauties from Blizzard's secretary department brought a lot of small toys to tease her. These small toys were all related to Blizzard, such as dolls and so on. Pardo, on the other hand, called someone to send over a children's car that his son played with. This car wasn't remote-controlled. The child could sit inside and control the direction by turning the steering wheel. He could also press the 2 buttons on the car to control the forward and backward movement. It was a pity that Kiki lost interest after Pardo helped control the car for a while. She liked to ride in her father's car, and this toy car that only crawled a little faster than a tortoise was out of the question. After they were done, they were ready to leave. However, Alan suddenly remembered the conversation he had with Poplar Fruit in Beijing. He suddenly said mysteriously, "Leon, I want to show you a game." "What game?" Poplar Fruit held his daughter with one hand, and Alan pulled him forward with the other. "This game is a countermeasure we came up with after Val poached Frost Frog from Dota." Alan chuckled. "This game used to be called Blizzard Dota because we gathered the important characters from the company's 3 best games, World of Warcraft, Diablo, and StarCraft, into this game." "There's such a game?" Poplar Fruit asked curiously. "Why haven't I heard of it before?" This game was indeed rarely mentioned in the media. There was once a screenshot of the map, but it disappeared without a trace. Poplar Fruit, who was far away in China and didn't pay attention to the news of the gaming industry, obviously didn't know about it. "Because we didn't announce it to the public, and it's a pity." Alan shrugged and said, "Because of the Dota trademark, we've changed our name to Blizzard All-Stars." "What a lousy name," Poplar Fruit secretly complained in his heart. "This game is basically complete, and we're preparing to release it together with StarCraft's Heart of the Swarm next year." Alan smiled. Yang Guo went to the office of the little-known game design team. Yang Guo was accompanied by one of the managers of the team. She started to play the game. "How is it?" Alan looked at Poplar Fruit excitedly. "What do you mean, how is it?" "It's not bad. Do you want me to review it?" Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Just tell me what you think. I think you have a good idea," Alan said. The supervisor also looked at Poplar Fruit with a smile. Poplar Fruit tried hard to recall the MOBA games he played in the past. He scratched his head and said, "I think this game imitates Dota 2 deeply. Although there are big changes in the graphics, heroes, and skills, there aren't many differences in the gameplay. This doesn't highlight the game's uniqueness. I know you want to use Blizzard All-Stars as a gimmick to attract players from the other 3 games, but this won't last long. Who knows, they might even be attracted by Dota or League of Legends. After all, they've been in operation for a long time, and the gameplay is very interesting. Do you guys think we can add something new and more fun?" Poplar Fruit looked into their eyes and said tentatively, "For example, wild monsters. After killing them, will they drop revival runes, and players will be able to obtain a batch of wild monsters that can fight for them?" Poplar Fruit's words attracted a lot of listeners. The programmers on the side all stopped what they were doing and looked at Poplar Fruit. "What else? What else?" Seeing Poplar Fruit stop to drink some water, the supervisor asked anxiously. "Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than or equal to." Chapter 245. Poplar Fruit talked about a few more details of the game, then looked around at the people around him. In the end, he saw a dark mass of hungry eyes. He swallowed his saliva and said, "Also, can the pace of the game be faster? Many old players don't have much time to play games. You see, a game of Dota takes more than half an hour. If we can be faster, many people will like it." As for the name, Poplar Fruit said, "I always feel that the term All-Star reminds people of the NBA All-Star game. It's just an entertainment game for everyone. It can't be serious. It would be better if we could change the name." At this point, Poplar Fruit stopped. He really didn't have anything to say. They had all emptied him. "Hey, hurry up and say it. Why did you say it halfway?" The supervisor said anxiously, "You haven't said what the name is better. Do I have to say the name?" Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes. "I don't know how to come up with a name. Like my game, I came up with a name that wasn't very famous, Heroes of Warcraft. It was so frustrating. If you asked me to name it, I could only give it names like Heroes of Blizzard, Heroes of the Storm, Heroes of the Hurricane, and so on. Heroes of the Storm, Heroes of the Storm. That doesn't sound bad," the supervisor muttered. Blizzard was indeed an extreme weather control. He suddenly stood up, clapped his hands, and said, "Everyone, cheer up. Let's go for a meeting. I think our game needs to be modified. It needs a big change." With the supervisor's order, the surrounding programmers instantly ran away. In the blink of an eye, Poplar Fruit was only left with Alan, the guy who had nothing to do. Poplar Fruit looked at the messy ground with a dull gaze. He realized that he really didn't understand this group of people. A layman like him casually said a few words, and they made such a big fuss. Sigh. Alan shook his head and sighed. It looks like this game is going to skip tickets again. Poplar Fruit stood up and pulled Alan outside. Let's go. It's getting late. Actually, it had nothing to do with time. He just felt that he might have accidentally screwed over an entire team. Of the 36 stratagems, the best stratagem was to run. Before leaving, Alan gave Poplar Fruit a big box of Blizzard accessories, dolls, t-shirts, figurines, notebooks, and so on. Poplar Fruit quite liked it, so he called for a courier and asked them to send it back to Yangcheng. There were a lot of things, so it was not bad to give them away. In the afternoon, Poplar Fruit contacted Zheng Yujie. He didn't want to tell her about the attack because he didn't want her to worry. The investigation should be out in a few days. Poplar Fruit made an appointment with her to meet in Los Angeles tomorrow. Alan didn't want to go home, so the two of them went straight to the hotel and booked 2 rooms. However, his sister-in-law, who had a falling out with Alan, suddenly appeared in Florida with 2 kids. When she received the news, she immediately flew back on the fastest flight. When they met, the two of them hugged each other. Alan's wife was called Linda, and she was about the same age as him. It could be seen that the two of them were a pair of enemies. They hugged each other, crying and scolding each other, but that kind of attachment and reluctance could be seen by anyone. Even though they were at loggerheads, the two of them stuck together like glue because they were separated by life and death. Of the 2 kids in Alan's family, one was around 7, while the other wasn't even 5. The younger one sucked on his finger and looked up and down at Chi-Chi, who was in Yang's arms. He felt that this little sister was quite cute, but she looked unfamiliar. He was timid and didn't dare to come up and greet her. Kiki had been sick and frightened for the past few days. She couldn't let go and always wanted to lean into her father's arms. Normally, she would have shouted for her father to let her down and walk. Therefore, Poplar Fruit wanted her to play with Alan's youngest son, but she refused. Just as Poplar Fruit was about to carry her down, she immediately turned cloudy. That night, Alan was finally willing to entertain Poplar Fruit at a high-end restaurant. His family followed Poplar Fruit and his father and called a private room. Linda was a housewife, but she usually liked to pay attention to fashion. Today, she was dressed particularly charmingly. Her eyesight was much better than Alan's. In a short while, she discovered the uniqueness of Poplar Fruit's clothes. "Leon, your clothes?" Linda suddenly called out in a low voice. "What's wrong?" Alan's hand trembled as he tasted the red wine. He thought that some food had stained Poplar Fruit's body, so he took a few tissues and handed them over. Linda smiled and said, "No, that's not what I mean. Look at Leon's clothes. Isn't it a bit special?" "What's special?" Alan asked, puzzled. "The materials are exquisite, and the workmanship is exquisite. It's definitely not ordinary clothes." Linda pinched Poplar Fruit's sleeve with her fingers and rubbed it. "Really? Why can't I see it?" Alan asked, puzzled. "The design is very unique." Linda ignored this guy who only knew about games and didn't know anything and continued to analyze. "Looking at the workmanship, it should be handmade, but I can't find any representative logo." "Leon, did you cut off the logo?" Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "No, it's a draft of a friend of mine who works in the clothing industry. He didn't think it was successful, so I accepted it." "Then your friend must be a master." Linda nodded and said, "His sewing skills are really superb." Poplar Fruit smiled and didn't continue. He didn't think it was necessary to show off his relationship with the old man Arnold. After dinner, Linda gave Kiki a very beautiful Barbie doll. It was really beautiful. For girls, the charm of Barbie dolls was irresistible. After opening the package, Kiki couldn't wait to hold it in her arms. Finally, a bright smile bloomed on her face, which she hadn't seen for 2 days. Of course, this wasn't a good thing either. Chi-Chi was just like before. She had found her favorite again, and she wouldn't let go anymore. Even when she slept, she would hug him to sleep. In the evening, Poplar Fruit called Fong Beibei again and told her the price of the card. $6 million. Fong Beibei panicked. She said incoherently on the phone, "No, I can't take so much money. Don't give it to me." Her thoughts were very similar to Poplar Fruit's in the morning. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, "Why can't I take it? It's all because of your hard work." "But it's all because of you. It's your idea. How can you give it to me just like that? Besides, it's so much money. I'm afraid, Fong Bebe said hesitantly. What are you afraid of? Poplar Fruit asked curiously. Fong Bebe hesitated for a while, then said, It's not good to have too much money. It'll become bad. Poplar Fruit didn't know how to answer. Fong Bebe also felt that what she had just said was a bit strange. She quickly said, Forget it. I'll wait until you come back. Come back early. Everyone, use your votes to buy tickets for the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 246. In a luxurious villa in Beijing, there was the sound of things being smashed. How many days has it been? Why is there no reply? Did you succeed? Give me a reply. Fuck your mother. Why is it so unreliable? Lisa Chow roared. He picked up an ashtray and smashed it on the ground. The website he used to find assassins was a bit like a trading platform. He found an assassin there, paid a deposit, and the rest of the money was placed on the website. If he succeeded, the website would be responsible for sending the money to the assassin. If he failed, or there was no reply from the assassin within 30 days, the rest of the money would be returned. Didn't the assassin say that he was ready to act when he found an opportunity? Why was there no news after 2 days? Without a phone number, he could only ask through the website's internal text message. Lisa Chow had asked a few times, but there was no reply. Yanghua, Zheng Yujie, and the rest had been in the U.S. for almost a week. They should be back soon. Do I have to go and pick them up at the airport to confirm it? Or the assassin was not short of money and would only give him a reply when it was almost 30 days later? Lisa Chow did not think that the assassin could not handle Poplar Fruit. He had investigated Poplar Fruit. He was a child from the countryside. He did not have any background or special abilities. Such a person was easy for the assassin. However, he had been looking forward to the news of Poplar Fruit's death. There was nothing better than seeing his love rival's corpse on the street. He did not know. Fortunately, he did not have the assassin's contact information. Otherwise, the American police and even the Interpol would be targeting him. On the way back to Los Angeles, Poplar Fruit received a message from Song Jiwen. Why aren't you back yet? I haven't finished my business. How can I come back? However, it could be done in 2 days. You are not sleeping in the middle of the night. Don't you have to go to work tomorrow? Poplar Fruit replied, Hey, I just wanted to tell you something big. Song Jiwen said, What is it? Poplar Fruit was shocked. That little junior sister of yours, your dear fake girlfriend, Miss Duan, is a big deal. Song Jiwen said. Poplar Fruit couldn't help but call in directly and ask, I'm going to faint. Can you finish your words in one go? What the hell? You're awesome. I'll make a long story short. I don't know what happened to Duan Shuiching 2 days ago. She was crying and crying. She even rushed to look for you. But you didn't come back, right? I asked her, but she didn't say anything. Song Jiwen said quickly. He also knew that the phone bill was expensive. What's going on? Poplar Fruit asked. Should I call her tomorrow and ask? I don't think it's necessary. Aren't you coming back in 2 days? If there's anything, it's better to talk about it face to face. Song Jiwen hesitated and said, It's not too late. It seems that when I saw her today, she stopped crying, but she was still cold and ignored me. After hanging up the phone, Poplar Fruit thought about it. He still felt a little worried, but it wasn't a good time to call now. It was better to wait until night, during the day in China, to call back and ask. To be honest, Song Jiwen had scared him just now. He had encountered a lot of things recently, and now Song Jiwen had given him another one. Yanghua thought that something had happened to his parents. When he returned to Los Angeles, Zheng Yujie came to pick him up. The two of them discussed and decided to go shopping. After going abroad, they had to buy some gifts for their relatives and friends. Although they didn't buy things on behalf of others, they couldn't take back what they bought. After all, the things here were much cheaper than in China. Although Los Angeles couldn't be compared to the Big Apple, it was still the second largest city in the United States. When Poplar Fruit named Kiki, he got the inspiration from its name. There was a Disney children's park in Los Angeles. It was bigger and full of surprises than the one in Harbor City. Zheng Yujie smiled and asked Poplar Fruit if he wanted to take Kiki there. Poplar Fruit looked down at Kiki, who was immersed in the world of Barbie dolls, and shook his head with a smile. Kiki was too young now. Even if she went to the amusement park, she wouldn't be able to experience the fun of the amusement park. He would take her there when she was older. Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie spent more than half a day shopping. Poplar Fruit bought a lot of things and directly sent them back to China. Zheng Yujie didn't shop crazily like Poplar Fruit. She actually enjoyed the time with Poplar Fruit. Back in China, the two of them were from different places and couldn't see each other for a long time. It would be even better if the good times could be a little better. Of course, the good times weren't those strange things that everyone wanted to see. Before they returned to the hotel, Zheng Yujie received a call from Yang Martel. It was a call from Martel himself. He agreed. Zheng Yujie cheered excitedly at Poplar Fruit before she put down the phone. After waiting for 4 or 5 days, she finally got the good news. This was the first time she had completed a difficult task alone, without the support of other seniors in the publishing house. Zheng Yujie was as happy as a 15-year-old girl. She rushed towards Poplar Fruit and jumped onto Poplar Fruit's body. Poplar Fruit used one hand to protect Kiki and the other to catch Zheng Yujie, supporting her fleshy butt. Zheng Yujie hung on to Poplar Fruit and gave Poplar Fruit a kiss. "Okay, can you tell me what the situation is?" Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "Yang, Martel said that your translation was very good. He decided to give the book to us. We'll sign the contract tomorrow," Zheng Yujie said quickly. She didn't even pant when she said that. "And he's also in Los Angeles. That's great." Poplar Fruit put Zheng Yujie down and waved his fist. He said happily, "I knew he'd agree." After a night of partying and celebrating and coaxing Kiki to sleep, Poplar Fruit remembered what Song Jiwen said during the day. He picked up his phone and dialed Zheng Yujie's number. He had become numb to the calls from overseas for the past few days. She hung up. Poplar Fruit picked up his phone and looked at it suspiciously. He wondered if it was the same as Fong Beibei, where Duan Xueqing thought it was a scam call, so he sent a message to Duan Xueqing saying it was him and asked her to answer the call. In the end, Duan Xueqing still hung up. He called again, and she hung up again. Then, she turned off her phone. What's going on? Poplar Fruit was confused. She didn't pick up and even turned off her phone. What was Xueqing doing? It was daytime in China. Could it be that she didn't pick up her phone when she was in a meeting? She didn't have to turn off her phone, forget it. Shaking his head, Poplar Fruit decided to put this matter aside for the time being. After signing the contract tomorrow, it was about time for him to return to China. Song Jiwen had a point. It was more convenient to talk about things face-to-face when he returned. But what happened to Duan Xueqing that made her in such a bad mood? Birthday, I'm 1 year older. Is Xiao Han leading the way in his journey towards 30? Haha, everyone must be happy. Chapter 247. Yang? The address that Martel gave them was inside UCLA. This university was abbreviated as UCLA. Although it was not as famous as Harvard and Stanford, and it was not as famous as the University of California, Berkeley, its strength was not to be underestimated. It was ranked second among the public universities in the United States, second only to the University of California, Berkeley. In the world rankings, it was also in the top 15. Yang had heard of this university a long time ago, but it only existed in the quotes of some papers. Because the university was too big, about 1 square kilometer. Yang and Zheng Yujie took a taxi directly to the school. The driver seemed to take this route often. Along the way, he happily introduced the buildings here to Yang and Zheng Yujie. Yang and Zheng Yujie were in a taxi. It had to be said that the university's buildings inherited the multicultural characteristics of the United States. Each building had its own characteristics, such as the medieval style, the Gothic style, the Slavic style, etc. The charm of buildings from all over the world could be found here. It was very different from the monotonous universities in China. Of course, the fusion of classical and modern was a major theme here. Nature and human buildings were closely integrated. Many of the buildings were covered with green plants, which gave it a somewhat harmonious charm. Yang? Martel was going to hold a lecture here today. The scale of the lecture wasn't too big, so he decided to settle it with Yang and the others after the lecture. However, this school was too big, and Yang Martel himself did not quite understand. After Poplar Fruit, and Zheng Yujie got off the car, they still had to ask for directions to find Yang. The building that Martel was talking about. It should be here. Poplar Fruit pointed to a large staircase classroom and said to Zheng Yujie. Although the door was closed, they could see many students sitting inside. Zheng Yujie carried her bag and followed Poplar Fruit. The two tiptoed and pushed open the back door and walked in. When they walked in, Poplar Fruit realized that they had walked into the wrong classroom. It wasn't Yang who was speaking on the podium. It wasn't Martel, but a white-haired old professor. He was immersed in his lecture and didn't notice that two uninvited guests had barged in. There was a camera mounted on the stairs behind them, and a young man in a hat was operating it. When he heard the noise, he raised his head and looked at Poplar Fruit and Poplar Fruit strangely. He noticed Kiki in Poplar Fruit's arms, and then made a shushing gesture at them. Poplar Fruit was embarrassed. He quickly pulled Zheng Yujie back along the way and closed the door. He seemed to have heard some psychological terms. Probably this old professor was talking about psychology. After coming out, Poplar Fruit helplessly looked at Zheng Yujie, who was laughing. He pushed her and said, "Okay, I know I made a fool of myself. Do you have to be so exaggerated?" He thought of the young man who made the gesture to him and asked Zheng Yujie in confusion, "What's going on?" There was a camera there. Could it be that this school is broadcasting the class live? "You don't understand," Zheng Yujie said with a little pride. "They are having a public class." Under Zheng Yujie's introduction, Poplar Fruit understood that this was a new thing that gradually rose in the country after he graduated. Public classes, to put it bluntly, were some famous schools recording some of their lectures into videos and then putting them on the internet for everyone to watch and download. In fact, there were already schools doing this a few years ago. The more famous one was Yale University's Game Theory. In essence, the public class was a way for the university to promote itself. It saved a lot of trouble, effort, and money. However, to a certain extent, it also allowed these sources of knowledge that only existed in the ivory tower to be shared around the world. Therefore, the public classes of the world's top universities would be sought after by people. After all, these were things that people could only look up to in the past. There are also many public class videos in our country. Zheng Yujie said, "I saw one a while ago. It's called Qinggu Mingyue. It's written about the moon in our Chinese culture. It's quite good." "So that's how it is?" Yang Guan nodded thoughtfully. After a long time, they finally found Yang Martel. "Martel. Leon." Yang Martel had just finished his lecture and was talking to a few students. When he saw Poplar Fruit, he happily greeted him. "Mr. Martel." Poplar Fruit shook hands with him and smiled. "Because I couldn't find anyone to help me, I brought my daughter here. I hope she won't disturb you." In fact, it wasn't that he couldn't find someone to take care of her. After Poplar Fruit went through a life and death struggle, he didn't feel comfortable letting his daughter stay with strangers. Besides, Kiki didn't want it either. "No problem. Today is the last step of our cooperation. There's no need to be so serious. Besides, looking at this cute little angel reminds me of my daughter when she was young." Martel laughed out loud. "Yang?" Under Martel's request, Poplar Fruit directly called him by his name, Yang. This made Poplar Fruit feel weird. He felt like he was calling himself Yang Martel, who received the results of the business survey. Martel finally believed in Poplar Fruit's ability. There was no other way. In the face of this manuscript that didn't have the author's name and title, 87 out of 100 people chose very good. How could he not be tempted? In fact, Yang Martel was extra careful. He used his own money to ask a business survey company to take the manuscripts that Yilin Publishing House had translated for him. Out of 100 people, only a dozen chose to continue reading. Everything was afraid of comparison. In comparison, Yilin's manuscripts seemed weak. The strong were willing to compare because comparison could show off their strength. Poplar Fruit's manuscripts were like this. They became extra precious. As for the new contract, Yang Martel didn't have any objections because it was better than what Yilin Publishing House had given him before. He paid more attention to this opportunity to cooperate with Poplar Fruit. After signing the contract, Yang Martel held Poplar Fruit's hand tightly and said seriously, "Leon, what you said to me last time is very reasonable. My book shouldn't be popular because of other people's movies. I also hope that my readers can truly recognize this book that I've poured my heart and soul into, and not because of a movie with the same name. And you also said that your translation can give my book a new lease of life in the Chinese mainland. I hope you can really do this. Martel stared into Poplar Fruit's eyes, looking very serious. Poplar Fruit patted his shoulder, smiled, and said to him confidently, "Please rest assured, I won't let you down." Walking out of the building, Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie, who was holding the contract tightly, looked at each other and smiled. They had conquered another fortress. Of course, this was only the beginning of the battle. This chapter is actually a foreshadowing. Chapter 248. After staying in a foreign country for a long time, one would miss every bit of their hometown, especially Poplar Fruit. His appetite had been raised by himself, and he was not used to seeing raw vegetables and meat overseas. Although he did not look down on foreign food culture, he still preferred authentic Chinese cuisine. After signing the contract, Poplar Fruit did not want to stay in America anymore, so Zheng Yujie booked a flight back to China for the next day. Zheng Yujie originally asked Zheng Taiming to drive her Maserati to pick her up, but there was an annoying tail following behind. "Sis!" Zheng Taiming's eyes were sharp, and he saw his sister walking out of the passage with a strong aura. He quickly stuck his upper body out from the crowd and waved his hand desperately. Zheng Yujie heard the sound, took off her sunglasses, and looked over. Her face darkened, and she whispered to herself angrily, "Damn, how did this kid get bastardly here?" That's right, standing next to Zheng Taiming was Li Zichao, who looked feminine. He stood behind Zheng Taiming with a smile, trying to give Zheng Yujie a good impression. Li Zichao had thought it through. Zheng Yujie treated him like that, but he could not be angry. He had to marry her first, and then he would be angry. If he did not marry her, his future would be in vain. Since he had hired an assassin to deal with her lover, she should be in a state of heartbreak now. Then, he could take advantage of the situation and take her down in one fell swoop. So, even if he had to pretend, he had to do it well. However, Li Zichao's face froze immediately, because he saw Poplar Fruit, who was pushing a large suitcase and carrying a baby girl behind Zheng Yujie. Isn't he supposed to be dead? Li Zichao's eyes widened, and his heart was in a mess. Did the assassin really fail? If so, the disappearance of the assassin could be explained. But how could it be? How could a pauper from the countryside, a weak scholar, escape from the professional killers that he had hired with more than $100,000? Li Zichao's facial muscles were twisted together. His originally feminine appearance now looked somewhat ferocious. Poplar Fruit had already noticed when Li Zichao was looking at him that way. He looked at the guy behind Zheng Taiming strangely, not understanding why he was looking at him like that. Of course, Poplar Fruit wouldn't associate Li Zichao with his attack in Irwin. That would be too ridiculous. After all, it was his first time meeting Li Zichao. However, the obvious hostility felt very familiar. It's like the one who followed me before I went to America. Perhaps he was the pursuer that Zheng Yujie mentioned that she couldn't get rid of? Poplar Fruit thought to himself. He was quite at ease as he leisurely followed behind Zheng Yujie. "Why did you bring him here?" Zheng Yujie didn't wait for Zheng Taiming to answer. She raised her hand and said domineeringly, "You and you, shut up. You don't have to say anything. Give me the key. I'll go back by myself." Before Zheng Taiming could react, Zheng Yujie took the key from his waist directly. Then, she casually threw $200 in a sentence. "You can take a taxi back by yourself. Don't come to see me if you don't understand." Poplar Fruit looked at Zheng Taiming, who had a bitter face, and then looked at Zheng Yujie, who walked forward without looking back. He saluted Zheng Taiming as a greeting, and then quickly followed with his daughter in his arms. When they got into the car, Zheng Yujie seemed to have changed into a different person. She suddenly became gentle, and before she started the car, she even used her long and slender fingers to gently poke Chi-Chi's face. She smiled and said, "Chi-Chi, Aunt Zheng is going to drive. Do you like it?" Kiki held the Barbie doll with one hand and waved happily with the other. She said in a childish voice, "Car, Hurry up. Okay, let's hurry up. Zheng Yujie laughed. The engine roared, and the Maserati directly started at 70 kilometers per hour. Then, it sped up to 120 kilometers per hour. Fortunately, they were soon on the highway. The traffic was relatively small, so Poplar Fruit wasn't very worried. Lisa Chow, who was walking slowly at the back, couldn't see the Maserati after getting on the car. He angrily punched the steering wheel with his fist again. Now that Zheng Timing didn't dare to hang out with him and ran to call for a taxi, he could vent his anger to his heart's content. Again and again, Zheng Yujie, Poplar Fruit, you were slapping my face. Lisa Chow roared ferociously. No matter how much he screamed in the car, no one would hear him. Because when the security saw his luxury car, they would hide far away. No, Zheng Yujie, you will definitely be mine. Just you wait. Lisa Chow fumbled for his phone and looked for the contact list. It's fine you stick to him first. After I'm done with him, I'll take care of you. Poplar Fruit, you have no background and you dare to snatch my woman? You're looking down on my Lee family too much. Lisa Chow looked at the phone number on the screen and sneered. If I do a thorough investigation of you, do you think I can't take care of an aunt like you? I don't believe that I can't. His gaze returned to Zheng Yujie's car. Poplar Fruit did not directly take the plane back from Beijing's airport because it would be evening by the time he reached Beijing. If he took the plane again, he estimated that he would only reach Guangzhou in the middle of the night. Thus, he might as well spend the night in Beijing. Zheng Yujie drove the car and smiled at Poplar Fruit. All right, little Poplar Fruit, when is it convenient for you? I'll come over to Guangzhou to look for you. Poplar Fruit turned his head to look at her in puzzlement. You told me about it when we were in Big Apple. Zheng Yujie glanced at him from the corner of her eyes and smiled. Tell me when I'll go over. You can take me to the fun places in Guangdong province. I remember all of them. Oh. Poplar Fruit suddenly understood and said, Okay, I'll bring you there whenever you come over. It's convenient for me. Poplar Fruit suddenly remembered the matter with Duan Xueqing. He scratched his head and changed his words. But let's not do it this month. It's a little inconvenient. I've been running around outside for a few days. I'll go back and rest first. Kiki also needs to recuperate. Actually, that wasn't the reason at all. He just remembered that Duan Xueqing lived downstairs. If he didn't solve her unknown problem and Zheng Yujie went over, the two of them would be like Mars meeting Earth. Just thinking about it gave him a headache. If Zheng Yujie wanted to come over, Poplar Fruit would gladly agree. But the premise was that he had to solve the problem with Duan Xueqing. It's not convenient. You don't have any sincerity. Zheng Yujie curled her lips and said, Poplar Fruit was even more embarrassed. He didn't know what to say. Okay. Seeing that Poplar Fruit was in a difficult position, Zheng Yujie's heart softened. She said, I'm just saying, I don't have to go back with you now. Let's talk about it when I'm on vacation. Chapter 249. Poplar Fruit counted his fingers and found that he had been out for 15 or 16 days. He had not been home for half a month. When he opened the door, Poplar Fruit felt that the air in the house was a little moldy. So the first thing Poplar Fruit did when he got home was to open all the doors and windows of the house to ventilate it. Papa! Kiki kicked her legs, pushed the baby walker, and ran happily to Poplar Fruit's side. The baby walker slammed into the sofa. Ouch, I hit it, Kiki laughed foolishly. Get out of the way. Poplar Fruit coaxed and pushed Kiki and the baby walker away with one foot. Papa's going to mop the floor. He bent down and carefully wiped Kiki's position and the edge of the sofa with the mop. Kiki did not give up. She pushed the baby walker around Poplar Fruit and asked, Papa, where is Gold? Like a spinning top, she swayed in front of Poplar Fruit from time to time. This little girl even held her Barbie doll in the baby walker. Gold is with Sister Bebe. We will ask her to get it back later. Poplar Fruit said with a smile and continued to work. Where's Bebe? Chi-Chi asked incessantly, and there were already signs of 100,000 whys in her mind. Bebe is at school. Wait a minute. When Papa is done, I will call her and ask her to talk to you, okay? Poplar Fruit said patiently. Okay. Kiki got what she wanted. She did not continue to pester her father. Instead, she sat in the baby walker and played with her Barbie doll. She whispered to herself, "Gold, baby, gold, this girl." Poplar Fruit shook his head and continued to work. After the house was refurbished, Poplar Fruit called Fong Bebe and told her that he was back and that he would go to school to find her in 2 days. Kiki, on the other hand, was talking to Fong Bebe on the phone. No one knew what they were talking about, but they seemed to be engrossed in the conversation. After calling Fong Bebe, Poplar Fruit called his relatives and friends one by one to announce his return. Everyone had different reactions. His mother was more concerned about when he would return to his hometown. It was almost the middle of April, so he should be back by now. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and promised her that he would return as soon as possible. He had just returned to Yangcheng, so there must be many things that he had to deal with. Song Jiwen only knew how to eat. Over the phone, he kept pestering Poplar Fruit to ask if he had brought anything delicious back for him. Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes and said, "Didn't I send everything back for you to keep? Don't you know if there's anything to eat at home?" Duan Shueching still did not pick up his calls, and Poplar Fruit did not know what was wrong with her. He decided to ask her directly when she came back from work. Yao Dehua was a busy man, so he hurriedly said a few words to Poplar Fruit about the meeting next Monday. Poplar Fruit agreed. Since he had accepted the position given by Yao Dehua and taken his shares, he had to help him. Wenjua's phone could not be reached, so he asked his sister-in-law. It turned out that he was out on a mission, so Poplar Fruit arranged a time to visit him. He did not have any relationship with Wenjua, but he had brought some gaming peripherals from the U.S. He wanted to give some to his nephew, and he knew that he would definitely like it. She didn't need to list the others. Anyway, after a lot of calls, it was already lunchtime. Her stomach was rumbling with hunger, and her mouth was dry. Yangwu quickly made herself a bowl of noodles. Because there was no meat or vegetables in the fridge, she could only eat vegetarian noodles. In the evening, Song Jiwen returned home. Poplar Fruit was busy preparing dinner in the kitchen. When Song Jiwen opened the kitchen door, the smell of garlic and oil wafted out. Delicious food? Song Jiwen was drooling. He did not wash his hands and directly threw a piece of pork intestine into his mouth. Delicious. It's really delicious. Don't make trouble here. Get out. The oil and fumes are going to enter the house. Poplar Fruit kicked him out and closed the door. Kiki sat in the baby walker and giggled when she saw Song Jiwen being kicked out. Heartless. What a waste of Uncle's love for you. Song Jiwen mumbled and gestured at Kiki. Then he went to the bathroom to wash his greasy paws. After coming out, Song Jiwen squatted beside Kiki and teased her. Kiki, you were in the U.S. for so long. Did you miss Uncle Mosquito? I didn't. After Chi-Chi said this, she turned her head and wanted to run away. However, Song Jiwen held onto the baby walker and pulled her back. She kicked her legs wildly, but they wouldn't budge, so she started to whine and act coquettishly. I didn't miss Uncle Mosquito. Uncle Mosquito is so sad. Song Jiwen insisted on acting. He covered his left chest and pretended to fall. One of his eyes was still squinting to see Kiki's reaction. He was destined to be disappointed. Kiki blinked her eyes, her long eyelashes blinking. She looked at him without saying anything. He did not know if it was an expression of speechlessness. Damn, little Kiki, you are so uncooperative, Song Jiwen said gloomily. Don't swear in front of my daughter. Poplar Fruit had sharp ears and shouted in the kitchen. You can hear that? Song Jiwen was even more depressed. They were separated by a glass door. The sound of the fire, the kitchen hood, and the clashing of pots and spatulas were all so loud. How could he still hear him? Song Jiwen saw a Barbie doll on Kiki's baby walker. What is this? Did Poplar Fruit buy it for you in the United States? After saying that, he reached out to take it. Kiki treasured this Barbie doll so much that she did not even give it to her biological father, Poplar Fruit. How could she let Song Jiwen touch it? She reached out like lightning and took the Barbie doll back into her arms. Then she twisted her waist to protect it. She did not even let Song Jiwen see it. Let Uncle Mosquito see it? Just take a look. Song Jiwen coaxed. He had not seen clearly what the doll looked like. No. Kiki stammered. Show it, show it. After thinking for a long time, she finished the rest of her words. It's Kiki's. I know it's yours. Song Jiwin coaxed. I'll just take a look. I'll return it to you after I take a look. Kiki shook her head. She remembered that Song Jiwin, the guy with a bad conscience, had lied to her last time that she would let him take a look. In the end, he had peeled open Kiki's candy and eaten it. Although he had taken another one from the jar for Kiki, Kiki would forever remember his ugly face. Song Jiwin rolled his eyes and continued to coax her. How about this, Kiki? Let me take a look. Later, I'll buy you 10 of these, and each of them will look different. How about that? He knew that Kiki was very smart and could understand what he meant. Kiki hesitated. It seemed very tempting to exchange one look for 10. She lowered her head to look at the Barbie doll in her arms, then looked at Song Jiwin's shy face. In the end, she shook her head resolutely. Ha! You lied to my daughter. You deserve it. Poplar Fruit, who had been standing behind them, laughed loudly. He knew the cause and effect of this. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 250. After knocking for a while, Duan Xueqing's door slowly opened. Poplar Fruit was holding Kiki with a bright smile on his face. He waved at her and said, "Good evening. We're back." Duan Xueqing held onto the door frame and didn't speak. Half of her face was exposed. Under her cold expression, there was a trace of sadness. She always hid her emotions well, but Poplar Fruit still noticed it. What's wrong with you?" Poplar Fruit asked in confusion. "Why aren't you talking? You didn't pick up when I called you earlier? You won't let me in?" Duan Xueqing hesitated for a moment before opening the door. She turned sideways and let Poplar Fruit in. The living room was dark, and only the bedroom had a faint light. The light wasn't from a lamp, but was similar to a table lamp. Poplar Fruit turned around and felt around on the wall near the door before turning on the light in the living room. "You're going to bed so early?" Poplar Fruit looked at the time. It was only 8:30. "No," Duan Xueqing said, her words as precious as gold. She usually didn't speak much, but at this moment, Poplar Fruit felt that she spoke even less to him. This wasn't normal. The former was due to her personality, while the latter was intentional. "What's wrong with you?" Poplar Fruit leaned his butt against the sofa and asked in confusion. "You're cold to Song Jiwin. So why are you cold to me? Is there something in your heart that you can't tell me? Who are you to me?" Duan Xueqing couldn't help but say this sentence. Then she turned her head and looked at the ground. She didn't know what was there to see on the ground, but she didn't want to look at Poplar Fruit. "What do you mean?" Even if Poplar Fruit was a blockhead, he could hear something strange. He frowned and said, "We're classmates and good friends. If there's something you can't solve, we can discuss it." "Just good friends?" Duan Xueqing suddenly looked at Poplar Fruit and looked like she was about to cry. She didn't cry easily. Poplar Fruit hadn't seen Duan Xueqing cry in the past few years. Seeing her like this, he panicked. He quickly stood up and asked, "Hey, don't cry. What's the matter? Tell me. What did I do wrong? If you don't tell me, how will I know?" In the end, Duan Xueqing held back her tears. She walked into the bedroom and came out with a brown envelope. She tilted her head and handed it to Yanghua. "What is it?" Poplar Fruit took the envelope in confusion. Poplar Fruit was holding Kiki. It was a little inconvenient, but he still awkwardly took out the things inside. It was a stack of photos. Poplar Fruit was very familiar with the content of the photos. Wasn't it him and Fong Beibei? There were many scenes, such as on the school road, in front of the apartment by the Zhu River, and even a photo of the two of them on the balcony. Kiki was also in the photo, but it didn't matter. It was the stalker who knew martial arts. Suddenly, Poplar Fruit's mind flashed with the strange man who escaped with his agile body. That's right, it must be him. Poplar Fruit couldn't imagine who else would have these photos except for that strange man. Was it Duan Xueqing who hired someone to take these photos? Poplar Fruit extinguished the thought just as it flashed through his mind. He wasn't stupid. These photos were obviously a conspiracy. How could it be Duan Xueqing who hired someone to take these photos? If it was Duan Xueqing who hired someone to take these photos, how could the feeling of being spied on appear in the neighborhood? Besides, Duan Xueqing wasn't that kind of person. Someone who knew martial arts and knew about him and Duan Xueqing. Poplar Fruit immediately thought of the few Xing E-Fist hooligans he met at the hot pot restaurant that day. They couldn't beat him, so they came up with this idea to sow discord between him and Duan Xueqing. Poplar Fruit was furious at the thought of being secretly photographed. The veins on the back of his hand bulged as he held the photos. He couldn't wait to throw the photos away and settle the score with them. Baby! Kiki's eyes were sharp. She lowered her head and curiously looked at the photos in her father's hands. She recognized the person who was singing by the river at a glance. She happily called out, "Kiki, Papa." Kiki recognized everyone, but Duan Xueqing's face turned a little paler. She was on the verge of collapsing. She tilted her head and pressed it against the back of the sofa. She said gloomily, "How long have you been together?" "What do you mean, how long have we been together?" Poplar Fruit felt that this question was wrong. He explained, "The person in the photo is my friend. You're living together, and you're still just friends?" Duan Xueqing couldn't help but ask, "When did we live together?" Poplar Fruit said speechlessly, "I rented that place to live in when I was in school. It's too troublesome to come and go. And she's here to play with us as well. Aren't I good friends with her and you?" Although he said this, Yang was still felt that he was lying. His feelings for Fong Bei Bei should be deeper than that of a friend. However, they were just friends. Therefore, it wasn't wrong to say that they were friends, and it wasn't a lie. "You and I are just good friends?" Duan Xueqing felt like crying. Her eyes were filled with tears. How familiar was this dialogue? Weren't all the melodramatic TV dramas like this? No matter how slow Poplar Fruit was, he finally understood the crux of the problem. The girl in front of him, just like Song Jiwon said, had feelings for him. Moreover, it wasn't just feelings. After the incident where she pretended to be his girlfriend in front of his mother, she had already misunderstood his thoughts. Poplar Fruit had a good memory. His mind quickly flashed back to Duan Xueqing's behavior before he went abroad. If that was the case, then Duan Xueqing's unhappiness when she heard that he was going abroad with Zheng Yujie made sense. Although his EQ wasn't high, Poplar Fruit still decided to clarify this relationship with Duan Xueqing. He said, "Xueqing, don't you know? I've always treated you as my good friend." When he said this, he wanted to slap himself. It was too melodramatic. Wasn't this the "I've always treated you as my sister" melodramatic plot that he had always hated? No, what I meant was, Poplar Fruit saw Duan Xueqing's expression quickly turn gloomy. He also knew that he was being too blunt. He quickly explained, "What I meant was that we are really good friends now. I don't know if you've misunderstood." Why did it feel like the more he explained, the worse it felt? Duan Xueqing stood up straight. She tilted her head and didn't want to look at him. She pushed Poplar Fruit out and said in a low voice, "Okay, you don't have to explain. I'm going to sleep." Bang! The door slammed shut, cutting off Poplar Fruit's thoughts of saying more. Poplar Fruit didn't know why he felt so frustrated. He hugged his daughter and couldn't let it out. At this moment, he realized that he had brought the stack of photos with him. Yes, the Guo family's Xingyi boxing dojo. Poplar Fruit gritted his teeth. He clenched his left hand into a fist and squeezed the photos until they made cracking sounds. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.